of course I wondered why. I wondered why this had to happen to me. And it seems like that things happen in my life like a hand that fits a glove, like it was always meant to be. Now, when I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, praise be to God, I was a very sensitive and empathetic young kid. The conditions that my people were living under concerned me. When I would see fights in the neighborhood, or I would hear stabbings, or when I would hear a racial strife, it concerned me. Many nights I went to bed and tears would come down my eyes. And I wanted to find out what was the problem. Where was the answer? I wanted to know the whys. I knew the what, and I knew how the chaos was being propagated, but I didn't know why. And I always felt that the why of the major answer was in God's hands, that He is the source of all whys of the world. So I grew up wanting to really be a minister. I wanted to do something to help my people, or help them rise above the conditions that I saw in East St. Louis, Illinois. Now, during the time that I was growing up, there was no difference between East St. Louis, Illinois, and the deepest part of Mississippi. We had separate washrooms. There was a black drinking fountain and a white drinking fountain. There were, in the theaters, we had to sit in the balcony. And when we were downtown, if there was a white person coming towards you on the sidewalk, we had to step off. This is the way we were trained, and let them go by. We were taught to say yes, sir, and no, sir, not only to the European, but also to our parents. It was just a matter of respect. It wasn't a matter of being Uncle Tom or any of those words like that. It was just a matter of giving everyone the respect. So after I graduated from Lincoln University with a BA in music composition, my very, very beautiful and loyal wife, Barbara Hardy Bolden, and I were married in my last year of college. And she played a major role in making me what I am today. She has gone on now to be with God, but she was the strong pillar of my life. Had it not been for my wife, who gave me 3 wonderful children who are alive today and who were very successful, I don't think I could have made it, because many times God spoke through her to me. After a year, I had worked at Pinkerton, and my wife was reading that same Post-Dispatch again. And this was a year later. She said, Abraham, she said, the state police have an ad in the paper that they're looking for a state patrolman. I said, well, I'm doing okay at Pinkerton. She said, no, you're not. She said, we got a baby coming and Pinkerton's not going to cut it. So I said, all right, I'll go to Springfield and I'll take the test to become an Illinois State Trooper. So that's what I did. And in 1957, I became an Illinois State Policeman and was stationed in Peoria, Illinois. As a matter of fact, I was the first African-American or black Negro stationed in Peoria, Illinois. And they had a lot of fun with that around there. Peoria, Illinois was a little small town then of some 85,000 people or so. And it was a hit what we used to call a hick town. When I would drive up and down the highway, the young European men would holler out, "Hey, Smokey," you know, things like that. Well, that didn't bother me so much because I have to be frank with you, in that big hat with the wide brim, I did kind of look like Smokey. So I couldn't get angry with anybody about that. But I did run into a couple of very racist people, you know, on the highway. You stop a man, he's from Alabama, Georgia. I had one driver to tell me, "You're not a state policeman because black people can't be state policemen." I showed him my badge at 1191. I said, "Sir, I'm an Illinois state policeman. I would like to see your driver's license." He said, "I don't give my driver's license to no niggers." I said, "Sir, you're going to give me your driver's license, or they're going to have your funeral next week. Now that's up to you." So he surrendered his driver's license. I was very polite. So in 1906, I took the test, and on October 30th of 1960, I became a Secret Service agent, stationed in Chicago, Illinois. Now here's where things get plenty good, and this is where God began to show his hand. When I came to Chicago, I ran into some racism that would make East St. Louis look like the most liberal town in the world. Chicago in the 60s, it was a backbiting type of racism. It was not overt, but it was a backstabbing. You look around and you've been cut. It was a type that was so secretive and organized, they had cliques to make sure that you don't progress. That's what I found in the early 60s. I found when I went to Washington, D.C., we were in the midst of a civil rights movement. And I mean, that was chaos all over the United States. Brothers and sisters, blacks were being lynched down in Mississippi. I mean, it was somewhat like today, but maybe a little worse. We had a lot of leaders back then. We had Al Raby here in Chicago, and Dr. Martin Luther King was just coming around then. And we had several other known leaders that were in Chicago trying to solve this racial thing. But it flared up. I know in my neighborhood where I was living, we had a big riot down there at 59th and Market because blacks were integrating into that section of the city. See, when I came to Chicago, there were no black people living across Ashland Avenue. When I came to Chicago, Ashland Avenue was about it. Where Halstead had been the dividing line, my family and I, we started integrating just west of Halstead, but Ashland was still a dividing line. But anyway, I'm just bringing you up on a little history. We had the bus rides were going on then, and these European, these Southerners were throwing fire bombs. They were burning schools, blowing up churches. It was just going crazy. And here I was, walking into history in the White House. Now, when I got there, I found that some of the agents who were protecting the president, especially the ones that were from the South, they hated the president. They hated him because the president had come out forthright and made his position known. That as long as he was president, he wanted everyone to be treated equally. He didn't want to give anybody a head start, but he wanted a level playing field, and that's what impressed me about it. See, he organized events and made appointments to his cabinet that held the upgrowing, the coming forth of the Negro. They were put in jobs that they had never been able to hold. We had Andrew Hatcher, who became the first African-American press secretary, deputy press secretary. We also had a woman who became President Kennedy's doctor. But this stern racism that surrounded Kennedy among his bodyguards, I heard agents say he should be killed. Now these are his protectors. These are the people who are protecting him. Somebody should blow his brains out. And that eventually happened. They left pictures of me. It would draw black men with huge black lips and things like that, and put them where they know I would see them. You know, little beady hairs and all this kind of stuff, and crying and things. I put that in my book. It's in my book how they did me. But what really pushed my button is when we went to Hyannisport, Massachusetts. And here was this beautiful black wax. She was in the Women's Air Corps. And she was dressed in a uniform, just looked so beautiful. And the president's plane had just landed, and I was in a Secret Service car going on my way to a Hyannisport compound with 8 other agents. One of the agents looked out of the car, wondered, and said, "There goes a nigger." And I had to control myself, because that testosterone that I don't have any more of, I mean, it just, you know, I was ready, and I had a .357 Magnum on my side. Could have blown his brains out, but I think maybe I made the best decision. I just made a note of it in my mind.
Mr. Bolden, after the hung jury, did you think that you had proper legal representation to keep you from being in double jeopardy with another trial?
I think that George Howard, who was my attorney, did everything possible that he could do without putting his own self in jeopardy. See, George was a young lawyer. We went to school together. We belonged to the same fraternity. I made him in the fraternity. We had known each other for several years.
Okay.
And he was just up against it. They wanted to convict me, and wasn't anything going to stand in the way. And the reason that I know that is because when this issue came before the Court of Appeals, and they called the state's attorney, the U.S. Attorney Ed Hanrahan, and the assistant state's attorney up before the 7th Circuit State Court of Appeals, and asked the U.S. Attorney point blank, did you manufacture a case against Abraham Bolden, the defendant? He asked him that 3 times. The attorney said, Your Honor, to the Chief Judge now of the United States Court of Appeals, 7th Circuit, Your Honor, I refuse to answer on the grounds that my answer may tend to incriminate me. He took the 5th Amendment, and yet they affirmed the conviction and sent me to jail.
Yes.
So you can see no attorney who was breathing at that time could have done anything, but it was not for them to do it. So you can see how this went down. See, and all of this is so that I would have the opportunity to fulfill my promise to God.
while. You know my soul.
Taking them to church on the Katherine Massey book club context of white supremacy. Worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade. Today's date, Friday, April 25, 2025. So I have been told. This is our 6th installment, Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, the true story of the first African American on the White House Secret Service detail and his quest for justice after the assassination of JFK. We are picking up kind of in the midpoint of chapter 13. It was right at the point. So this is the second trial. We still got old suspected racist Judge Perry on the bench, and the jury has been out deliberating, but they're taking a long time, and so they're sitting saying, you know, them taking a long time, that's good for us. George Howard, his attorney, Mr. Bolden's attorney, they're just out waiting it out. That's what we left off at in chapter 13. The audio segment that we started off with, that is from 2017, Copy Line is the name of the program. Victim of racism, Juanita Bratcher, black female. She was doing the interview with Mr. Bolden. I thought we got a lot of great anecdotes. But I don't give my license to no Negro state troopers. Shout to Peoria, Illinois. I think that's where Richard Pryor was born and raised, Peoria, Illinois, unless I am mistaken. Either way, but I thought he gave a lot of great anecdotes, and the shout out to his wife, Deborah. They were married for so many years, and he has so much appreciation and gratitude for their counter-racist attempted marriage over all of those decades, and talking about the impact him going to prison had on her health and well-being as well. Anyway, I wanted to include Mahalia Jackson. He said we're doing a little bit of, giving you a little bit of history. Well, we try to do a little bit at the cows as well. We have Mahalia Jackson playing. I don't think there's any way we can do all of this Chicago history, and especially for this time period, and not include Mahalia Jackson, the great. This is from Isabel Wilkerson's one good book at this point, the chapter Revolutions. She writes, by the end of the year, the 7500 block of Colfax and much of the rest of South Shore Chicago went from all white to nearly totally black, which in and of itself might have been a neutral development, except that many houses changed hands so rapidly it was unclear whether the new people could afford the mortgages and the rest were abandoned to renters with no investment or incentive to keep the places up. The turnover was sudden and complete, and so destabilizing that it even extended to the stores on 75th Street, to the neighborhood schools, and to the street sweeping and police patrols that could have kept up the quality of life. It was as if the city lost interest when the white people left. The ice cream parlor closed. The Five and Dime shut down. The Walgreens on the corner became a liquor store. Karen and Kevin enrolled in a Bradwell Elementary School and remember being, along with two other kids, the only black children in the entire school in 1968. By the time they graduated 4 years later, the racial composition had completely reversed. Only 4 white children were left. South Shore would become as solidly black as North Shore was solidly white. Ida Mae Gladney's neighborhood never had a chance to catch up with all the upheaval and was never the same again. South Shore was one of the last white strongholds on the South Side, the completion of a cycle that had begun when the migrants first arrived and started looking for a way out of the tenements. There were 58 bombings of houses that blacks moved into or were about to move into between 1917 and 1921 alone. Bombings have become one of the preferred methods of intimidation in the North. In neighborhood after neighborhood, the arrival of black residents, the response during the migration years was swift and predictable. It happened to ordinary people like Ida Mae Gladney and to celebrities like Mahalia Jackson, the leading gospel singer of her day, when she began looking for a house in a well-to-do section of the South Side. People held meetings up and down the block. A Catholic priest, didn't the Pope die this week? Say it twice. A Catholic priest rallied his parishioners and told them not to sell to her. You'd have thought the atomic bomb was coming instead of me, the singer said. She got calls in the middle of the night warning her, you move into that house and we'll blow it up with dynamite. You're gonna need more than your gospel songs and prayers to save you. She bought the house. It was a sprawling red brick ranch and the house of her dreams, coming as she had from the back country of Louisiana. A doctor had broken ranks and sold it to her. As soon as she moved in, the neighbors shot rifle bullets through her windows. The police were posted outside her house for close to a year. One by one, she said, they sold their houses and moved away as fast as a house came on the market. A colored family would buy it. The great Mahalia Jackson. The only thing I will say, the only picture that I took of the stars in Hollywood, you know, the boulevard out where they have all of the so-called celebrities and all that, the only picture of a star I took, Mahalia. Katherine Massey Book Club context of white supremacy.
How I got over, how did I make it over? You know my soul back and wonder, how did I make it over? How I made it over, coming on over all these years. You know my soul look back and wonder, how did I make it over? Tell me how we got over, Lord. Had a mighty hard time coming on over.
We returned to the courthouse and waited. As the hours passed, looks of concern appeared on the faces of the prosecutors and Secret Service agents, who must also have anticipated a quick verdict. Howard just kept telling me, in this situation, no news is good news. Finally, at about 5:30 p.m., the judge called the opposing attorneys into the courtroom, where the attorneys assembled in front of his bench. It's been a long day, and it's getting late. I'm tired, and I'm going to close the courtroom for tonight and go home and get some sleep. We will meet back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., and the jury will continue its deliberations at that time. If there are no objections, the jury will seal its verdict until the attorneys can be gathered and the verdict can be read in open court. I'm going to close the courtroom now, and I will advise the jury of my decision. Perry instructed Arthur Dunn to see that the courtroom was emptied. Dunn motioned to George and me, gathered up the spectators remaining in the gallery, and then escorted us all out of the courtroom. Martineau, Sims, Jordan, and Torina followed, taking an elevator to the Secret Service office on the 4th floor. The rest of us went down in the elevator with Arthur Dunn, who ushered us out of the building and then remained inside. I remember watching Dunn walk back toward the elevators as the heavy glass doors to the courthouse were locked behind us by the uniformed guard. "What's going on, George?" I asked anxiously. "They've locked us out of the courtroom, and the jury is still deliberating. The Secret Service agents and government attorneys are still inside the building. We're standing outside, and I don't know what's going on in there." Howard didn't seem alarmed. "The judge said that he was going to release the jury until tomorrow morning. They aren't going to do any more deliberating tonight," he said. "The jury will give a sealed verdict if they reach a verdict before we arrive in the morning. That's what the judge ordered." "They're not going to reach a verdict before I get here in the morning. I don't like the idea of having the judge say anything to the jury when we can't hear what he is saying. You know what happened in the last trial. Now he is locked up inside the building with nothing but government agents, prosecuting attorneys, and an all-white jury. He can say anything that he wants to say, and there's nobody in there. Look, Abe, the court is closed for tonight. There won't be any more deliberating until tomorrow. The judge is going home, and the jury can't deliberate without the judge being there," he repeated impatiently. "Then why didn't he say what he had to say to us in front of the jury? How come he didn't bring the jury in?" "Abe," Howard replied, "the man is a federal judge, and he can run his courtroom any way he wants to. He can—" "Well, who is going to release the jury tonight, and when is he going to release them?" I snapped. "Judge Perry will release them." "I don't trust Judge Perry to do anything or say anything to the jury when we are not in the courtroom. The building is full of government agents. Everybody in that building now is against me and hoping for my conviction. Judge Perry maneuvered us into a position so that he could tamper with this jury like he did the last one without us hearing what he is telling them. I have a constitutional right to be in that courtroom while the jury is deliberating." "I'll meet you here at 9 a.m. tomorrow," Howard said coldly as he turned and headed home. As Barbara and I walked toward the parking lot, I let loose. "It's a done deal. I'm as good as convicted right now. There is no way that Judge Perry will let the jury find me other than guilty." A few moments later, as we were driving home and I was scanning the radio for any news about the trial, we heard a news reporter announce a special bulletin. "There has been a verdict in the Bolden trial. The jury has just reached a verdict in the trial of Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden," the newscaster said. "The verdict was sealed and will be read in court tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The judge has released the jury until tomorrow morning." I was not surprised. "That's what I was saying!" I shouted at Barbara. "The judge didn't go home. He stayed in the courtroom. He flat out lied to us when he said that the jury would stop deliberating for the night. He lied so that he could get us out of the courtroom and do his thing with the jury behind our backs. He tampered with the jury, I'm sure." "There's nothing you can do about it now," Barbara said sadly. "Control yourself. Don't go in there tomorrow exploding if they find you guilty." "I need to do more than explode." Another tormented and sleepless night passed. I fielded calls from my sister and brother, offering their love and support and vowing to be with me in court for the reading of the verdict. I went over and over it in my mind. Judge Perry had clearly manipulated the situation so that he could be alone with the jury. That fact was not in dispute. Nothing he had said made sense. Why did he need to make a provision for a sealed verdict if the jury had stopped deliberating for the night? Of course, there was no court reporter present, and no transcript exists of what went on in that courthouse after we were shown out. But I have no doubt that the legal process was horribly corrupted that night. The next day, August 12th, brought no surprises. Everything unfolded according to the government's well-planned script, although to me it all seemed utterly surreal. The room was crowded with onlookers. The relaxed confidence of the government lawyers and the many Secret Service agents present suggested their certainty about the verdict. When Judge Perry ordered me to stand and hear the judgment, 2 marshals appeared and took up positions just behind me. The clerk unsealed the envelope and on the judge's cue began to read. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Abraham Bolden, guilty of count 1 of the indictment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Abraham Bolden, guilty of count 2 of the indictment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Abraham Bolden, guilty of count 3 of the indictment." There had never been any doubt. Judge Perry explained that he felt no need for any further reports or hearings before passing sentence, but did offer George Howard the chance to make a statement. My attorney took the opportunity to remind the court of my spotless records and years of dedicated service, and argued that I deserved a sentence of probation, but Judge Perry looked like a man whose mind was already made up. Then he asked if I wished to make a statement. I stood and told the court that in my years as a private detective, state police officer, and service agent, I had always tried to do my best. With my voice beginning to crack and Howard tugging lightly at my sleeve, I forged ahead, declaring that all of my actions had always been in the best interest of the government. As I spoke, my emotions suddenly burst through to the surface. "Have mercy," I pleaded, bursting into tears. "In the name of God, have mercy!" I sobbed openly before the court. "That's the first sign of repentance that you've shown," Judge Perry said bitterly. "You committed perjury in this court and have brought shame upon the Secret Service. I hereby sentence you to the custody of the U.S. Attorney General for a period of 6 years on count 1 and 5 years each on counts 2 and 3. The sentences are to run concurrently." Of course, there was no evidence of perjury, nor was any perjury charge ever filed against me, but Judge Perry managed to slip in that reference to make me look even worse in the eyes of the press and the public. Despite the government's request that I be immediately incarcerated, the judge declared that I would remain free on bail pending my appeal. He set a hearing date of September 4th for post-trial motions. "All rise," intoned the clerk. "The court now stands in recess." The Secret Service had its conviction, but I didn't think for a moment that it was over. The trial was but the first phase in what would be a long ordeal. Putting me in jail would not be enough. I had no doubt they'd try to discredit me further if they could, to destroy any last bit of respect or credibility I might have had. Chapter 14. Before the verdict, my father had given me some words of warning that now helped me focus on some immediate priorities. "The government has several ways to get you," he said. "If they convict you, they will send you to prison, or they will send you into financial ruin. You will lose everything trying to fight them and stay out of prison. Either way, you'll be a broken man when they finish with you." Indeed, a week or two after the conviction, I received a registered letter from the Chief of the Secret Service formally notifying me that I had been terminated as an agent of the government. The letter included information on claiming the roughly $6,000 that I had contributed to the government retirement program in the 4 years of my employment there. I was going to need that money and more. Neither Barbara nor I had a job now. In addition to the ongoing expenses of our home and family, we needed to finance the upcoming appeal. For starters, I went straight to the unemployment office, hoping to draw compensation while I looked for a job. I waited for hours and hours like everyone else, but when I finally got to see a caseworker, a thick-set, middle-aged black woman, she told me there wasn't much she'd be able to do for me. "You haven't had any salaried income other than the government job within the last 4 years, and government salary does not qualify you for unemployment compensation," she explained. "Just thought I would check," I muttered as I got up to leave. "Not so fast," the woman said. "I know who you are, and I have followed your case all through the summer. You got a bad deal. I can't guarantee you any unemployment check because, as I said, you do not qualify, but I'm going to issue an unemployment card anyway. That way, I can send you out on some of the job interviews that come across my desk. I'm going to help you try to find something to do." I was extremely grateful and got myself registered, but I knew that I couldn't wait around for the unemployment office to find me work. I pored over the help-wanted sections of all the Chicago newspapers. In those days, it was still the best way to hunt for a job, especially because I could easily scan all the available positions, whether or not they matched my specific experience or qualifications. One ad I answered came from Alpha Engineering, which was seeking a temporary draftsman. Knowing a little about drafting and lettering, I went downtown and applied for the job. It went well, but my style of lettering wasn't what they needed. Thinking fast, I recommended Barbara, who I knew could letter almost as neatly as a typewriter. The next morning, she went down and landed the job. It didn't pay well, and we had no way of knowing how long the temporary position would last, but it was something, and it felt like a tremendous lucky break. I would be around to watch the children while she worked. Soon after, my brother-in-law helped me find work as a skip tracer for a tire company, tracking down people who were behind in their payments. This was exactly the kind of investigative work I was good at, and a lot of it was phone work that I could do from home. But I'd have to work as an independent, receiving a commission of half of any money recovered from delinquent accounts. I made less than $100 in each of the first couple of weeks. Bills were coming due. By January, my retirement check from the government still hadn't arrived, and the attorney and legal printer needed payment. I was learning that with a client like me, people wanted payment up front, in case I ended up in prison with no source of income. As I approached my 30th birthday that cold January, I began to despair. We could just about put food on the table, but we had nothing to spare. "It looks like I'm going to have to drop the appeal," I said to Barbara one night. "If I go away, at least there won't be the expense of me eating and driving the car. I think you and the children can get better support if I'm not here." "I'm not going on aid or anything like that," Barbara responded defiantly. "I think that you should stay out as long as you can." "I need at least $3,000 to go to the appellate court. We don't have the money. My retirement won't be here until later." "What we can do, Abe," she argued, "is borrow money against your retirement check. Before you go and tell them to lock you up, we can talk to the people at the bank and see what they say. I wouldn't turn myself in to anybody. What you need to do is have faith and pray." Incredibly, the doorbell rang at that very moment, and on the porch I found a delivery man with a package. It was heavy, and the sender's name on the outside of the box had been smudged so badly in transit that it was unreadable, though I could see it came from Massachusetts. I set the package on the floor and tore it open. "It looks like a typewriter," I said to Barbara. "Who would send me a typewriter? Maybe it's a trick by the government. You know, that faked excerpt was typed. Maybe this is the typewriter that it was typed on, and someone is trying to set me up." Sure enough, inside the box was a brand-new Olympia manual typewriter in a case. Attached to the typewriter was a hand-printed note that read simply, "You should type your story." It was signed Bill. His address and telephone number were neatly printed below his name. When I went to throw out the shipping box, I found an envelope, the contents of which surprised me even more. A check for $2,100, signed by a William R. Wagnett. I had never heard that name before. "This is really weird," I said to Barbara. "Here we are talking about needing money or going to jail, and out of the blue this check comes right to my door from somebody I don't know." "You said that you were reading the Bible and trying to see what to do." "God knows what to do," Barbara answered. "The check covered our legal costs and other bills for the month." Maybe Barbara was right. After discarding the wrappings, I telephoned Mr. Wagnett and thanked him over and over for the check. I found out that he was an elderly man living in Massachusetts who had followed my case closely. I turned 30 on January 19th, 1965. All that day I couldn't stop thinking about the dream I had when I was young, in which I saw myself trapped in a steel box with a small glass window. Through the window I could see a young woman standing with 3 small children, a vision that now made perfect sense to me. The image haunted me, even as we sat eating cake and ice cream with the children, listening to Barbara sing Happy Birthday in her beautiful soprano voice. I went to bed that night pondering that check, a strange but very timely birthday present from Massachusetts, and wondering where the next miracle might come from. The next day, the telephone woke me as I was slumbering in the easy chair. It was Ray Smith, the attorney who was handling my appeal, having taken over from George Howard. I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Something has happened in Judge Perry's courtroom that you should be real happy about, Abe. Spagnoli has just admitted that he committed perjury against you in your trials," Smith said. "I was in the federal building when all hell broke loose. I need to talk to you as soon as I can, so that we will be on the same page about this." "Wait a minute," I said incredulously. "Are you saying Spagnoli admitted that he lied? When did that happen?" "Just now. He was on the stand in Judge Perry's court in his own trial, and all of a sudden he told the court that he'd committed perjury in your trial. He accused Sykes of telling him to commit perjury. He had some document with him that he said Sykes gave him for the purpose of committing perjury in your case. I don't have all the details yet. It just happened an hour ago," Smith explained. "The press is outside the courtroom right now, and Judge Perry has called a recess. The reporters have already talked to me about Spagnoli's admission and are asking me to comment, but I don't have enough information about what was said on the record. The reporters are saying that Spagnoli outright admitted that he lied in your case." Man, that's really something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So what do I do now?" "I'm going back to the clerk of the court in a few minutes and order up an immediate copy of the transcript of the proceedings for today and a copy of the document that Spagnoli said that he got from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I want to see exactly what Spagnoli said to the court. In the meantime, I want to talk to you Friday. Don't discuss this case with anyone outside of your family." "I know the press is going to be coming out here tomorrow," I said. "Don't give any interviews to anyone, Abe. Don't say anything. Tell them to see me. Better still, don't answer the door if they come to your house. I have filed the notice of appeal already, and this case is officially out of Judge Perry's hands. I don't want you to say anything that will tilt the advantage away from you at this point." I promised to keep my mouth shut, and we agreed to meet at Smith's office that Friday. When Barbara came home from work, I was near bursting with the news, and at first she was overflowing with joy. "Does this mean that you're free now?" she asked. "No, not yet. The case is filed in the Court of Appeals right now. I don't know how Smith is going to handle this. I think that we are going to have to go back to Judge Perry and ask for a new trial." Barbara's smile quickly faded. "Judge Perry won't give you another trial. He did everything to get you convicted, and I doubt if he will free you no matter what Spagnoli or anybody else says." I needed to remain optimistic, but I could hear the weary hopelessness in Barbara's voice every time we talked about the case. Judge Perry had unmanned George Howard and me during the trials, and I hated him for it, but at that moment I needed Barbara to remind me where things stood. I also had to think about the additional money that any new motions were going to require, money that we didn't have. That night, we sat riveted by the news coverage and thumbed through the local papers. We found an article in the Chicago American newspaper in which Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert J. Collins had been interviewed just after Spagnoli's bombshell admission. "I can make no comment while the current trial is being held," Collins had told the reporter. He said that Spagnoli's statement would be evaluated, and if the perjury occurred as he had testified, there was a chance that the case against me would be dismissed. "I assure you that there will be a full investigation at its conclusion." Collins refused to comment on Spagnoli's assertion that Sykes had told him to lie. Sykes, a government prosecutor in the case against Spagnoli and the others, was in court and heard the perjury admission. When questioned by the reporters outside of court, he repeatedly became indignant and repeatedly answered, "No comment whatsoever." Bolden's attorney, Raymond J. Smith, a former United States attorney who resigned to enter private practice, immediately asked for a transcript of the Spagnoli comments. I flipped through the television dial, catching the pieces of the story on other channels, but didn't learn anything more. I knew I should have felt massive, cathartic relief, but I was still apprehensive. I had been through enough that I couldn't believe this could end quickly or easily. Ray Smith was the picture of confidence when I saw him at his office that Friday. He believed we could get the case thrown out of court, and told me he was preparing to go before the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals with a petition to remand the case back to Judge Perry with an order for a new trial. "With the information that I have been able to get so far, I think we have a good chance to get this case thrown out," Smith said. "Spagnoli said that Sykes told him what to say in your case and that a lot of it was perjury. I was able to get a copy of the exhibit from Spagnoli's trial." The paper that Smith handed me was an outline of the testimony that Spagnoli had given in both my trials. "That's Sykes's handwriting on the left side and Spagnoli's on the right side," Smith told me. "How did he get this?" "He told the court that he took it." "Took it?" You mean that he said that he took this paper from the U.S. Attorney's office without them knowing it? I recalled that I had tried to tell the Secret Service that Spagnoli could have pilfered the excerpt I was accused of selling from somewhere in our office when he was being interviewed by Agent Tom Strong after his arrest. Yep, he said he took it right before Judge Perry. Smith gave me some pages of the unofficial transcript he had procured from the court reporter, and said I could read them in the office, but couldn't take them with me. I made myself comfortable and started to read. The transcripts told a remarkable story. It seemed that at the time he had made his admissions, Spagnoli was under questioning by his own attorney, Frank Oliver, a savvy veteran of the Chicago courts who was known around the Secret Service as a mob mouthpiece. Richard Sykes, now prosecuting Spagnoli instead of using him to prosecute me, had attacked Spagnoli's character and credibility by demonstrating that he had been untruthful when he testified in his own trial that he was supported by his mother, plus some part-time construction work. This matched Spagnoli's testimony in my trial almost exactly, but it no longer suited Sykes's purposes. Now he needed to show that Spagnoli's income came mainly from counterfeiting and gambling. This obviously contradicted Spagnoli's earlier testimony in my trials, which Sykes had not challenged at the time. On redirect, Oliver asked Spagnoli if he had ever committed perjury in a federal criminal trial in the past, and Spagnoli acknowledged that he had. They then produced a piece of paper that had been torn out of a legal pad and had it marked as an exhibit. Spagnoli testified that he had been in Sykes's office when Sykes drew up the document. "What was the purpose that he gave you for writing up such a document?" Oliver asked. "So I will remember what to say in the Bolden trial," Spagnoli answered. The record showed that Sykes leaped to his feet and objected, but got nowhere. Judge Perry allowed Oliver to rebut the accusations about Spagnoli's credibility. Oliver continued, "After he wrote it up, he did give it to you?" "No." At this point, Judge Perry interrupted and asked Spagnoli directly, "How did you come into possession of it if he did not give it to you?" "I took it." "What was the purpose of your studying the document?" Oliver now asked. "To remember the lies in there," Spagnoli answered bluntly. Standing in front of the stunned onlookers in the courtroom, Oliver pointed at the document in his hand and kept probing. "Mr. Spagnoli, I called your attention to certain dates enumerated on this exhibit. I called your particular attention to the fourth line down, a date, Wednesday, May 13th. Do you see the notation that follows that Wednesday, May 13th call from Martineau? Did that call occur on that day?" "No." Just reading it made me shout out loud, "Damn it!" Finally, the facts that I knew to be true were coming to the surface. When Oliver moved on and began asking if Spagnoli had ever given testimony contrary to the testimony he gave in this case that he gambled for a living, Richard Sykes strenuously objected on the grounds that Oliver was impeaching his own witness. At first, Judge Perry sustained the objection, stating that he had no intention of trying another, previous case during Spagnoli's trial. He felt it was enough that Spagnoli had admitted giving false evidence, and did not want to go into any more specifics about it. Oliver sparred with Judge Perry as he tried different approaches, until finally getting him to reverse the ruling and allow the line of questioning. Spagnoli testified that in preparation for my trial, the U.S. attorneys had told him not to admit that his main income came from gambling and to maintain that he was supported by his mother. "And was that true or false?" Oliver demanded. "That was false," said Spagnoli. "And who suggested that you give such testimony?" "Attorney Sykes." "And did he say why he wanted you to so testify?" Oliver pressed. "Because I would look good in the eyes of the jury." Judge Perry interrupted Oliver's examination several times, trying unsuccessfully to derail Spagnoli's revelations. When Oliver was done, Judge Perry began to question the witness from the bench. "Just wait a minute. I want to ask the witness. Did I understand you to say a while ago, when you had the documents in front of you, that it was to enable you to remember lies? Judge Perry asked. Yes, sir, said Spagnoli. Are you telling this court now that under oath you lied in the Bolden trial? Yes, sir. You committed perjury then? Yes, sir. In what respect did you commit perjury? Spagnoli testified that he had committed perjury on dates and his employment, he added. That's all I can remember right now. On January 21st, 1965, the special agent in charge of the Chicago Secret Service sent a memorandum to the chief of the Secret Service in Washington, D.C., confirming that on January 20th, Spagnoli stated that the testimony given by him in the Bolden trial had been perjured, and that Spagnoli further states that he had given the perjured testimony relative to his employment and income at the direction of Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard T. Sykes. The memorandum noted that Spagnoli's testimony resulted in television, radio, and newspaper publicity, and that I had appeared on television stating that I would seek a retrial. Ray Smith talked excitedly about how he felt sure the case would now be overturned. But Smith was new to this case, and he was white. I respected Smith, but wondered if he knew how serious our disadvantage was. He had been a prosecutor himself, and probably couldn't fathom how deeply corrupt the system was, at least in this case. I could see only gloom, although I chose not to share that with Smith. For instance, one thing that I hadn't seen anywhere in the transcript was any mention of the judge, the prosecutors, or anyone else threatening any legal ramifications for Spagnoli's self-confessed perjury. I saw the whole case through the eyes of a black defendant, my eyes, in a white judicial system where nothing was guaranteed and nothing was as it seemed. This was America in the early 1960s, the country where 3 freedom riders had been kidnapped and murdered in Mississippi, and where 4 little black girls had been blown up in their church in Alabama. Racial tension boiled over in every corner of the country, much more so since the assassination of John Kennedy, which many black Americans felt was connected to his vehement stance against racism. In the last week of January, Ray Smith called, sounding very upbeat. I just left the Court of Appeals, he said. I filed a motion to have the case sent back to Judge Perry with an order of retrial. I hope we get the retrial, I said. But whatever happens, I don't want to be retried before him again. We have to take one step at a time, Abe. First, we get the case remanded back to Judge Perry, and then we see what else we will have to do before the retrial. It occurred to me that the complicated rules and procedures of our legal system worked against the interest of justice as often as they helped carry it out. As soon as I hung up with Smith, the phone rang again. Barbara answered and shouted from the other room that George Howard was on the line. Abe, I just hung up from talking to Spagnoli. Howard sounded excited. He was pissed because he had just found out that the government dismissed your case against Frank Jones today. He told me that he and Jones got together and fixed up the case against you. What? He admitted that to you? Yeah, and that's not all. Howard laughed. He told me that he stole that excerpt out of the Secret Service office and that he was going to blow up the government case against you by revealing how he and Jones fixed it with the help of Sykes and the Secret Service. He said that he would name names. Did he say who in the Secret Service helped him fix up the case? No, I told him to get in contact with your new attorney, Ray Smith. I tried to call Smith at his office before I called you, but he was out. In the meantime, I'm going to make out a sworn affidavit about my conversation with him and get it over to Smith as soon as possible, probably tomorrow. Man, this is really something. Abe, I know you have another appeal attorney on the case now, but I'm going to advise you as a friend and fraternity brother. If Spagnoli tries to talk to you, don't say anything to him without the presence of your attorney. This could get real nasty, and there is no telling how high up in the government this case will go when Spagnoli talks. So be very careful, Howard cautioned, because you could wind up in the alley in back of your house with a bullet in your head. These people don't give a damn about you. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Thanks, George. I hung up the phone and looked across the table at Barbara. Spagnoli called George and admitted that he stole the file out of the Secret Service office, I said, tears gathering in my eyes. He told George that he was going to name the people who helped him and Jones set me up. What are they going to do about it? Barbara asked bitterly. He already admitted that the day after your birthday last week, and they still haven't done anything to him about it. I tried to reassure her, reminding her that these things take time, but it wasn't easy, since I had so little confidence myself anymore. I hope it ends soon, Barbara said, sounding more resigned than hopeful. I hope it ends soon. In mid-February 1965, the Court of Appeals ordered the case back to Judge Perry, but did not order a new trial. Ray Smith outlined his immediate strategy. I'm going to file a motion for a new trial before Judge Perry, and he will probably set the case for hearing within the next 2 weeks or so. I talked to Howard, and he gave me his affidavit about the conversation that he had with Spagnoli. I'm going to include that in our motion for a new trial. I've already talked to Frank Oliver, and I'm going to make a certified copy of Exhibit 36 and have it ready for the hearing. Attorney James Ward is helping me with the appeal. You remember Ward, don't you? I had a couple of forged check cases with him when he was an assistant U.S. attorney, I answered. Well, he's assisting me at no cost to you. He doesn't like the way you are being treated, and has volunteered to help us through the appeal. I'm optimistic, Abe. I think we have a good chance of having a retrial of this case. Smith rang off, saying he'd let me know as soon as he had a date for the hearing before Judge Perry. On a cool, wet, wintry day in early March, I showed up at the new Dirksen Federal Building for the hearing. The featureless glass and steel high-rise now housed the federal courts in Chicago, having replaced the stately old granite courthouse with its ornate dome and massive pillars. I stepped into the elevator to go upstairs, and just before the doors closed, a young man darted in. I had been in law enforcement long enough to be able to spot another cop, even one in plain clothes. I figured this guy for either an FBI or Secret Service agent, and my instincts told me he was following me. That didn't surprise me. I had been hearing suspicious clicks and hums on my telephone line for months, but by that point I no longer cared. I knew I had nothing to hide. Inside the courtroom, my attorneys, Smith and Ward, plus Richard Sykes for the government, took up their places in front of Judge Perry. Ray Smith opened the proceedings by advising the court that we were seeking a new trial based upon newly discovered evidence that had been obtained subsequent to the conviction. He said that in light of Spagnoli's admission that he committed perjury in a federal criminal trial, before Your Honor, a new trial was necessary to correct the unfairness of a trial that hinged on perjured testimony. Yes, but Spagnoli did not say that he lied about many of the facts that he testified to, Perry responded. Your Honor, if you will recall the proceeding, it was Your Honor who stopped Mr. Spagnoli from going into detail about the perjured testimony. I believe the record will show that this court ruled that no further inquiry could be made as to the extent of the perjury while Mr. Spagnoli was testifying at his own trial. If I can refer you to the I'm familiar with the facts, counsel, Judge Perry interrupted. I was there at both trials, and saw the witnesses and heard them testify. Ray Smith argued that the court should conduct a hearing in which Mr. Spagnoli and other witnesses can be subpoenaed and called to the stand and placed under oath once again. Smith spoke with the confidence of someone who believed in the obvious truth of his argument. We need a hearing where this court can determine what the facts of this case really are. I will decide whether or not a hearing is necessary, Judge Perry replied a bit testily. I know so much about this case. If a hearing is necessary, I will give him one. James Ward rose at this point and got the judge's attention. Your Honor, if there is a hearing to be held in this matter, which we hope there will be, there will need to be subpoenas issued for several witnesses. I wonder how we may arrange for that to be done so that prior to the hearing date, we may have arranged for our subpoenas. I'm going to docket this case for March 22nd at 9 a.m., declared Judge Perry. I will only hear oral arguments that day. Then I will decide on that day if there is a hearing to be held. If there is a hearing to be held, we will fix it immediately. Your Honor, said Smith, Attorney Sykes has filed an affidavit in opposition to this motion with the clerk of the court. Nowhere in his affidavit does he once deny the testimony of Mr. Spagnoli that Spagnoli committed perjury in the Bolden trial. The affidavit filed by Attorney Sykes states that during the 2-week period between Bolden's first and second trials, Spagnoli was having trouble remembering the exact dates of occurrences in the Bolden trial. His affidavit says that Spagnoli could not relate the dates to the days of the week, specify times within those days, or describe what occurred at those times on those days and dates. I find it doubtful that Spagnoli could not remember anything about his testimony in such a short period of time, necessitating Attorney Sykes to draw up Exhibit 36, which Spagnoli testified that he stole from the U.S. Attorney's office. Your Honor, Sykes interrupted, counsel is arguing the case now. I thought that Your Honor just ruled that this case would be argued on the 22nd of March if a hearing was necessary. Yes, that is correct, answered the judge. We will recess this case now and will docket it for March 22nd. At that time, as I have said, if a hearing is necessary, I will hold a hearing. As we left the courthouse, Smith tried to appear unfazed, but by the frown on his face I could see how annoyed he was. I'll keep in touch with you, Abe. I was sure that Judge Perry would at least assure us of a hearing so that we can put Spagnoli under oath again and hear what he has to say. I knew in my bones that we were wasting our time in front of Judge Perry, but I kept my mouth shut. He wasn't about to allow any evidence in open court that might support my innocence. Now we had to follow the rules and procedures and sit there meekly and watch him steer my fate. 3 weeks later, on the 22nd, Judge Perry seemed all but indifferent to Smith's and Ward's oral arguments, nor did he care that Sykes made no effort of any kind to deny Spagnoli's charge that Sykes had told him to commit perjury. Sykes argued that Spagnoli had suffered a loss of memory sometime around July 29, 1964, in the period between my 2 trials, and that in order for Spagnoli to refresh his memory, they had recovered his previous testimony from various sources and reduced it to a written document, Exhibit 36. At one point it was brought up that when he testified in my trial, Spagnoli had vehemently denied that he had been made any promises in exchange for his testimony, but now Spagnoli was alleging that Sykes had indeed made him a promise before my trial. Sykes responded to the challenge, claiming that all he'd told Spagnoli was that information about his cooperation would be brought to the attention of the sentencing judge in his own case, should the time for his sentencing ever arrive, and I further told him, and it appears in the record, that he was fortunate that the same judge that is hearing the Bolden case will be hearing his case. In addition, Spagnoli had testified that he committed perjury when he testified that he called Martineau on May 13th, and in his own trial, Spagnoli testified that Sykes was aware of the fact that he was committing perjury when he testified to the May 13th date. Nowhere in Sykes's affidavit did he once deny that he told Spagnoli to lie about any of that. Your Honor, said Smith, Attorney Sykes has not denied any of the allegations of Joseph Spagnoli as outlined in defendant's motion for a new trial based upon newly discovered evidence. Under those circumstances, the defendant should be given a new trial where the perjured testimony can be challenged before a jury. The defendant has been denied a fair and impartial trial by statements made to the jury by Your Honor and by many instances of perjured testimony contained in the record. I have heard all of the evidence that I need to hear, replied Judge Perry. We will continue this motion until March 25th, and then I will be prepared to enter a decision in this matter. This case is continued until March 25th at 10 a.m., Judge Perry continued, obviously in no mood for further discussion. I will only hear oral arguments that day. Then I will decide on that day if a hearing is to be held. If there is a hearing to be held, we will fix it immediately. The Honorable J. Sam Perry banged his gavel down hard. Ray Smith had never seen anything like it. "Did you see that?" he asked as we left the court. "Sykes stood there and so much as admitted that he knew that Spagnoli lied in your trial. I thought surely that Judge Perry would grant our motion today, especially after the way Sykes acted in court." "I don't think we'll get anywhere with Judge Perry," I said disgustedly, stating what to me was obvious. "He's been against me all through the trials, and now that he sees the whole thing was a setup, he's not going to admit that he made a mistake about the case." I left my lawyer shaking his head in bewilderment and headed home in a light rain, feeling that we had come so close but were still so far away. In the few days before we were due back in court, my government retirement check came. Nearly all of the money was already earmarked for court costs and lawyer fees. As it was, Ray Smith was making next to nothing on this case, and I wanted to be sure he got what was coming to him. Barbara was lucky to still have drafting work, but things were getting tighter, and I needed to find steady work. I felt like the world was closing in on me. The courtroom was mostly full of lawyers on March 25th. Ray Smith and Richard Sykes sat watching and waiting while other lawyers argued motions and other trials before the court. When our turn came, Smith approached the bench, apparently still under the impression that Judge Perry intended to listen to reasonable arguments in my case. "Your Honor, prior to making a decision and the entry of a final order here, the defendant would request that since Your Honor was the judge in the D'Antonio case, the counterfeiting case in which Spagnoli was a defendant, you take into consideration that portion of the transcript in the D'Antonio case that Mr. Sykes referred to the other day when he was talking about the time of the Spagnoli sentencing. He called to your attention exactly what was told to Spagnoli about his cooperation in the Bolden case." But Judge Perry was done. He told Smith that he had taken into consideration every statement made by both attorneys and was about to enter a decision on the motion for a new trial by way of written opinion containing his findings of fact and conclusions of law.
I can say concerning this great gospel singer in our midst, our dear friend, my great friend Mahalia Jackson, that a voice like this comes only once in a millennium. there's any doubt in anybody's mind concerning whether we have a movement here in Chicago, you ought to be in this church tonight.
Katherine Massey Book Club, context of white supremacy. So we will pick up chapter 14, The Echo from Dealey Plaza. Mahalia Jackson gets her encore curtain call. Dr. King, while they were in Chicago, I think some of Dr. King's Chicago activities would have been concurrent to Mr. Bolden's incarceration. So, I don't know, maybe he would have been reading about some of this in the newspaper. Remember, maybe when Barbara, when she writes to him, or phone conversations or visits or what have you, she can, that's what they'd be talking about. Like, man, Dr. King was in town and said this is the most racist place he's ever been in the world. Like, Number to dial if folks have commentary, observations, 605-313-5164, the code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. As we are closing in on the end of the text, I think we should have maybe, I'm going to say three. Well, by the time I'm going to say 3 sessions. Just, I'm not really sure, but definitely we should be done sooner than later. This book is not that long, so you can be picking out major themes and takeaway points from this particular period of Chicago and what have you. The email is untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. We will check in, give folks who wrote observations, thoughts on the portion of the reading that we have done for today. I guess I'll give one little tidbit. I like to say, hey, Gus T tries to be thorough and not just say, hey, we picked the books. I didn't fall asleep between the clips and can halfway remember where we left off at while reading the book. I try to do a little bit better than that as a facilitator and see if I can find extra details and what have you to really maximize what we can learn for our counter-racist purposes, maybe even find something that'll help us replace white supremacy with justice. So, as we're reading this book, the attorney George C. Howard, Mr. Bolden's attorney specifically, he has his own book, 50 years at the bar and still sober. What I say, Katherine Massey Book Club, the biography kings. This here, add to the list, biography. So, this book's super expensive, way too costly for a broke nigger as myself, so I put it on my wish list. One of my listeners, investors, hooked old Gus T up, whoopee, wish list at Amazon, Gus T Renegade. But this is kind of an expensive book. I guess white people didn't make it readily available. It was like $60. I think that's expensive for a paperback book, $60. Like, Jesus Christ, I would have never had this on my shelf. But wish list comes through. So there's a whole section on Abraham Bolden. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll at least read a tidbit. This is page 67, 50 years at the bar and still sober. During the trial preparation, I decided not to use Bolden's public statement as a defense. That's the statement where he said that this is racist and the Secret Service agents were drunkards and they didn't protect President Kennedy, all that we talked about. That's what he's referencing. Instead, I attacked the credibility of the government's witnesses. During the third day of deliberation, Judge Perry called the jury back into the courtroom for further instruction. During that moment, I experienced something I will never forget. Judge Perry told the jury that they did not have to adopt or accept his opinion, that it was his opinion that Bolden was guilty on all counts in the indictment. I immediately made a motion for a mistrial but was denied. Upon inquiry by the judge as to whether they could reach a verdict in what was their count one way or the other, the foreman of the jury told the judge that they were deadlocked and stated that there is one among us who states that she would hold on to her verdict of not guilty until hell freezes over. The lone holdout juror for acquittal was a black female. Right on. The government elected to retry Agent Bolden, and over my objections, Judge Perry set the new trial date 2 weeks later. The government elected to retry Agent Bolden. A few days later, I was in the bond court on a different matter and ran into Joseph Spagnoli, the government's star witness. He approached me and said that he was so pleased with my defense of Bolden that he wanted me to defend one of his co-defendants, Lou Bartimeo, in the counterfeiting case. I declined. You have got to be joking. During the second trial in August of 1964, I experienced what felt like the entire United States government was against me. You know what? He's probably correct. It probably was. The first 3 rows of the courtroom were filled with Secret Service agents. Judge Perry's previously warm demeanor had changed, and the two main prosecutors, Richard Sykes and Arthur Dunn, were openly hostile. On the second day of jury deliberations at about 10 p.m., Judge Perry called the lawyers, including myself, into his office and asked if we would accept a sealed verdict. All of us agreed that we would accept a sealed verdict if they returned the verdict that night. I left the courtroom and did not return until 9 a.m. the next morning. Upon stepping out of the elevator, one of the deputy marshals who had been working in the courtroom during the trial approached me with disturbing news. Mr. Howard, if this comes up and you did not hear it from me, I want you to know the jury returned a verdict last night after you left. The judge opened the sealed verdict. Don't be surprised if the verdict is guilty. Well, wouldn't you know it? The verdict was indeed guilty. Should I have said spoiler alert? It feels like we already... Never mind. So Agent Bolden was sentenced to 6 years in the state penitentiary. I was told the counterfeiting charges against Joseph Spagnoli had been dropped in exchange for his testimony against Agent Bolden. However, I later learned from Spagnoli attorney Frank Oliver that the government had elected to try Spagnoli on the same charges. During the Spagnoli trial, attorney Oliver invited me to observe the trial as there was going to be a bombshell during Spagnoli's testimony. I obliged by attending the trial, and Spagnoli testified that Bolden never made an offer of $50,000. Spagnoli also testified that he committed perjury per the direction of the government's lead prosecutor, Richard Sykes. Spagnoli produced a written memorandum which he said was written by Sykes, giving him direction on his testimony against Bolden. Bolden has a picture of this document in his book. After Bolden's conviction, we both agreed that perhaps it would be better for him if he retained a new lawyer for his appeal. He did not have enough money to pay anyone to handle the appeal and desperately needed a favor. Privileged blackmail. Bolden had become acquainted years prior with a lawyer named Raymond Smith. Smith was an assistant United States attorney who by this time had gone into private practice. He agreed to represent Bolden for whatever money Bolden could raise. I agreed to stay on and assist. The brief on appeal was filed in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals and included a copy of the memorandum from Sykes to Spagnoli accusing Sykes of subordinating perjury. During the appeal process, the presiding judge asked Richard Sykes about the fact that he had been accused of subordinating perjury. Sykes pleaded the Fifth Amendment and said he would stand on the ruling of Judge Perry. Even with this new evidence, the 7th Circuit upheld Bolden's conviction and he was sent to the penitentiary. Spoiler, I guess? The United States Supreme Court refused to grant certiorari. I don't do Latin. You can look that up. Agent Bolden ended up serving 3 years in prison. Upon his release, he worked as a quality control supervisor in the automotive industry until his retirement in 2001. Lamar Walden and Tom Hartman, authors of the 2005 book Ultimate Sacrifice, John and Robert Kennedy, the plan for a coup in Cuba, and the murder of JFK, interviewed Bolden about his brief time with President Kennedy. In 2006, Bolden was also interviewed for the TV documentary Conspiracy Files, The JFK Assassination, which was based on the Ultimate Sacrifice book. The documentary asserted that mobster John Rosselli was responsible for framing Agent Bolden. And I'll stop there. That's almost the entire chapter. He just goes on to give a few more tidbits about Bolden and he both living in Chicago and what they've been doing with their lives since all of this went down. But 50 years at the bar and still sober. He has lots of tidbits about different cases that he worked on over his life and career. Mr. Bolden's attorney, George C. Howard Jr., reading more important than watching television. Anywho, I will say real quick before I get to the folks who called in, that portion where Mr. Bolden, in the part we heard this week, where he talked about going to the unemployment office in Chicago, I fell out in the floor because we do have that in the archives. Neely Fuller Jr. talking about going, and I don't know if it was the same unemployment office, but Jesus Christ, are you telling me Bolden and Fuller could have been in the Chicago unemployment office at the same time with our beloved off the wall, privileged black males? He ain't gonna get nothing this week either. We're talking about off the wall. You guys are like, hey, off the wall. And then he said this, I guess he said they did it alphabetical, so Fuller F's. He might be a little bit away from B with Bolden because they might have a lot of B's and C's and all that in between. But like, man, are you serious? And then they both end up in the same government federal job, which that's why we don't have got Doge and all that now. They both end up with the same federal department, Bureau of Printing and Engraving. Wackiest in the, and they had the same commentary about the unemployment office in Chicago. Fuller said, now you white and you hit the unemployment and you in there 1-2 weeks, pew. You off the wall, Gibson, Fuller, Leroy, Bolden, shh, man. Hope off the wall in here, keep us company because we're going to be hanging out for a long time waiting on employment in the Windy City. We talked about some of that. Harold Washington and Obeezy in the 1980s. So it looked like over 20 years going from the 60s to the 80s, nothing changed. Blackmail privilege. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. One more time. Shout to Off the Wall. Hope he's still out there. Not at the unemployment office. Maybe he's got retirement now. He can be growing cucumbers and telling stories to his grandchildren. And Fuller, I wrote the code book, really. Fuller got that from me. He's sitting around talking about I was off the wall. I was in there talking codification in there. They didn't want to give us no job. I was telling this labor, law, politics, religion. That's what I was telling him. He's going to tell me I'm off the wall. And Fuller don't give out no credit. No, that's what he's sitting around telling his grandchildren. There ought to be two names on the code book, Fuller and Off the Wall. Folks who dialed in, commentary to share, star 61. Let's see. Retired firefighter Shamika Harris should be with us. We'll nab other hands as I see them.
Is Ms. Harris available to go first?
I can go first, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Okay, so before session 1 started, when Mr. Bolden was talking in that audio clip that you played, I think I heard him correctly. It sounded like he said, these Europeans, these Southerners, were throwing firebombs. They were just going crazy. And I thought with that statement, he avoided saying white people. I think non-white people, much more comfortable with that sort of language when we get to use other words, other terms besides saying white people. And for today's session, when the judge gave that, right at the beginning, he tells him, it's been a long day and it's getting late. I'm tired and I'm going to close the courtroom tonight and go home and get some sleep. We will meet back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and the jury will continue its deliberations at that time. If there are no objections, the jury will seal its verdict until the attorneys can be gathered and the verdict can be read in open court. I'm going to close the courtroom now, and I will advise the jury of my decision. Perry instructed Arthur Dunn to see that the courtroom was empty. That sounded so weird to me. It just seems like, okay, why are you planning to seal the jury's verdict if you're about to send them home? That doesn't even make sense. And it was just the way, I don't know. I mean, he was lying, so I guess that's why it didn't make sense. Let me see. When Judge Perry ordered me to stand and hear the judgment, 2 marshals appeared and took up positions just behind me. Now, I don't go to court all the time. I'm not watching trials on TV all the time. But if the marshals come and stand behind you right before the verdict is read, I mean, it's like they're pretty sure you're going to have the guilty verdict. They're not even acting like that's, I mean, I'm trying to think back to, like, was it like that in O.J. Simpson's trial? I just don't think the police were standing right behind him. Usually they have to walk over after you get the guilty verdict. I guess they didn't have to walk over. And then when he gets up and he talks, and, I understand why he was emotional. And he said, as I spoke, my emotions suddenly burst through to the surface. Have mercy, I pleaded, bursting into tears. In the name of God, have mercy. I sobbed openly before the court. And the judge says, that's the first sign of repentance that you've shown. Judge Perry said bitterly, you've committed perjury in this court and have brought shame upon the Secret Service. Wow. I am pretty confident that this Judge Perry knew that Abraham Bolden was not guilty. To, find this person guilty, sentence him to 6 years for a crime you know he's not guilty of, and then say something like that, man, that's just, it's cold. It's, what do you say, racist to the bone. The black lady, when he goes to the unemployment office, well, first, she said, you haven't had any salaried income other than the government job within the last 4 years, and government salary does not qualify you for unemployment compensation. I actually had to Google and see if that was still the case. It does not seem like that's the case, but wow, it seems massively incorrect, to be like, well, if you work for this company, that's just like saying, if you work for Target, you lose your job, you can't get employment. That's just, the government employs a lot of people. Well, less than they used to. Maybe a year ago it was close to 2 million. Not sure what it is now. But that black lady, she tried to help him. She was like, I can't give you an unemployment check because you don't qualify, but I'm going to give you the unemployment card. That way I can send you out on some job interviews. And, she tried to help him find something. And I thought just her offering a fellow victim constructive assistance, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing every time we can, in my view. He tried to get the job for the drafting and lettering. He couldn't get it, but sent his wife down there and she got the job. I thought that was, fast thinking. It worked. The typewriter that came in the mail, so it looks like a typewriter. Who would send me a typewriter? Maybe it's a trick by the government. That fake excerpt was typed. Maybe this is the typewriter that it was typed on, and someone is trying to set me up. That is exactly what I thought. I was like, oh man, don't use that typewriter for anything. That's what I was thinking. And he said it was a note in there, and he called the person. It was he said, after discarding the wrappings, I telephoned Mr. Wagner and thanked him over and over for the check. It was a $2,100 check in there with the typewriter. I found out that he was an elderly man living in Massachusetts who had followed my case closely. I think it was an elderly white man. It's pretty important. Those racial classifications, people leave them out in text and just day-to-day conversation. I just think they're really important. Let me see. Oh, Spagnoli admitting the perjury. When I heard that, I felt kind of hopeful, but we know he went to the penitentiary, so it didn't help. I do like that they put that that Exhibit 36, I think it was, in here. I don't know. I like it when books put certain pictures. I like pictures in books. It makes you understand the story even more. They did that in that Johnstown book, and yeah, I thought it was great. It just really, it adds context. And Judge Perry, man, he just doesn't care. Because it actually said, just wait a minute, I want to ask the witness, did I understand you to say a while ago when you had the document in front of you that it was to enable you to remember lies, Judge Perry asked. Yes, sir, said Spagnoli. Are you telling this court, me, now that under oath you lied in the Bolden case? Yes, sir. You committed perjury then? Yes, sir. In what respect did you commit perjury? Spagnoli testified that he had committed perjury on dates and his employment, and that's all I can remember now. I'm actually surprised that Perry asked those questions because they were specific, and I don't know. It just seems like he would want Spagnoli to shut up and not talk about the perjury that he did in the Bolden case. Yeah, I think that's all I have for now, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Shamika Harris. Yeah, it's pretty wild all the way through in terms of the amount of power that white people wield in the courtroom. I guess knowing the outcome, you couldn't be too hopeful about, oh man, he admitted to perjury. Like, yeah. That is what domination looks like. I think, and even when Howard tells him when he's Judge Perry's going to clear out the courtroom and everything, and we'll seal the verdict and all that old nonsense, and Bolden, like, immediately, he's not even got a law background, and he's like, wait a minute, this is so suspicious. What is going on? And I think Howard recognized that too. But when he says, when he tells Bolden, like, hey man, this is a federal judge and a white man, he can run his court however he wants to. Facts. What are we going to do? Have a press conference? Put a gag on us, hold us in contempt of court? What are we going to do? Much obliged. Let's see. Retired firefighter, much obliged for yielding.
Greetings, everyone. My first thought was in the beginning of this particular session, the judge is continuing to use his power to affect the court. Mr. Fuller uses the two weapons that white supremacists use, deceit and direct violence. In this case, deceit is being used and specifically by the judge. And Mr. Fuller also says even deceit is a method of violence also. In other words, the victim is being violated. and I also have down here wrote down in my thoughts of following the reading, basically a political lynching was taking place in the court, which ultimately comes out to be injustice. His value seems to be loyal. Was his value, the value that Mr. Bolden has, seems to be a loyal, dependable, attempted wife and attempted parents. You know, once again, in this particular session, both he wrote about and how correctly they are assisting him in this terrible process that he is going through. He needed money desperately, which is, you know, not unusual in the court system, especially of a trial of this magnitude. And the court has an understanding of that, and if they're targeting someone that's trying to defend themselves, they use that lack of income that person has to mistreat them, and ultimately they end up doing some time. It was so frustrating. One of the family members stated something about, well, you know, God will help, or something like that, some phrase that took place, which is not uncommon to me in hearing it. And I have here is a tendency when we don't have answers, we use God metaphors. And that's quite popular with non-white people, which classify as black. And I stated, where was God when he was being mistreated at work and in court? And we normally don't have an answer for that. The lack of funds to defend yourself in court. I think I went over this. Is a major way the white supremacists use to mistreat victims of white supremacy. A trial designed to mistreat a defendant is common. It's quite a common way of mistreating people. Based on mistreating non-white people is in the court system itself. The lying witness, like Mr. Spagnoli, it's not unusual. You had the Simpson trial later on that we studied, and there's quite a few others that the major witness against a defendant is utilized to further harm that non-white person and send him to prison. Judge Perry was quite prepared to ruin anything regarding the hearing, regardless of the defense efforts. He was just set exclusively to send Mr. Bolden to prison. The judge may as well say, I would not be patient in this trial to hear all testimony in order to get to the truth. So judgment would not be, the judgment is not going to be just. Last but not least, the MLK activity in Chicago in and around that time, beginning late 1965 and 66, assisting a organization called the Chicago Freedom Movement, was about housing in slums. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Much obliged. Retired firefighter in Florida. Have to double check, but I think, Mr. Bolden, he certainly had already been convicted by that point, so he would have been either appeals process or greater confinement while all that is going on. That's what he can talk about while he's in the Hooskow and, what's going on? What? They had, Dr. King up here? You think you can come see me? That's not funny. Sorry. Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. And that, I think, Miss Harris, she had said about Mr. Bolden making a point that it was white people. He didn't say white people. Europeans were going crazy and fire bombs and all that, and from the South, Southerners and all that. Like, one, as we read from Isabel Wilkerson, there were lots of bombs in Illinois against black people at this time. Two, another Chicago legend that we are very familiar with, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she took time on this broadcast specifically to tell us, resist the urge to label the conduct of people classified as white as crazy. That is not crazy. I mean, ask Tim McVeigh. It takes some ingenuity. He didn't get convicted of no insanity or judged insane. It takes some know-how, some use of logic, cause and effect to be a bomber. Much less you can be a serial bomber. You can't be too nutty and be a bomber. You're not going to be around long. You know, got to observe some logic, have at least a little bit of common sense. If you're going to be a regular bomber, you can just more than a one-time act and blow yourself up. Facts. Lots of us. We do all that racial narrowing. The problem is just a few white people down in Georgia, Mississippi, and South Africa. If we just get rid of these few, handful of bad white folks, man, this problem is let's see. The Confidant. Let's see if we have the audio correct this time around. Maybe not. Maybe not. Still a tussle with the tech issues. We'll see if she mute button or jiggle maybe your audio configurations. I think even Miss Harris had the tidbits about the headset, perhaps from last week. In the interim, let's see. The email again, untiljustice@gmail.com. To email number 1, fair trial, in quotes, is a legal term of art jargon. It doesn't really exist, but it sounds good. Bolden's attorney had no choice but to say that the judge administered a first fair trial, especially if the attorney has other cases before the judge. I think Mr. Howard is the one who did tell him, hey, I'm not speaking as an attorney. I'm speaking as your black brother. You could end up with a bullet in your head, which I think I and others had said previously, particularly during this era. It would have been so easy for them to splatter Bolden's brains across the street. It wouldn't have been no, oh my God, they done killed Bolden and JFK. Like, are you out of your mind? Even whatever, that old no-count scoundrel Negro was stealing documents and pimping and raping and everything else, and we put something on the back page maybe, and Deborah and his children got to struggle and make do. They could have killed him easily. Howard told George Howard, he had told him that. So, man, I think George Howard and man, we better not get in here and act too much of a fool, because they could kill both of us easily. Let's see. And messing up, he could have been disbarred, so he can't even, work in the future or whatever else. And he might have to see Judge Perry in the future for other cases. Also true. It seemed to be a political stance the attorney made more than anything substantive. In almost 3 decades of practicing law, I've never heard of a just trial. I've never even seen justice in courtrooms as Mr. Fuller defines it. I was going to ask that, like attorneys or people who, you could even be a stenographer, or people that are myself going to cover a murder trial, 2 hopefully by the end of the year. Do they say ever at any time, just to switch it up? We didn't say it fair a gazillion times today. Do they ever switch it up and say, hey, we want to have a just day in court? Whoa, objection. It's supposed to say fair, sustained, fair. Get it right. Like, do they do that? Do they wrap you on the wrist if you don't say fair, if you try to use something other than fair in a court of law? Any hoodles. Incidentally, Ms. Harris, she had also asked, she said that the fix seemed to be in on the second trial, really both of them, but especially the second time around, where she said the marshals are moving in before we even get the verdict out, like, all right, get the cuffs ready so we can take him on. Like, they know what's going to happen. That was the case in the OJ trial too, except he was exonerated. But I think what we read, they said, at least Tubin, they're getting autographs and, well, you're going to be gone today. Get your stuff. You're going to be deuces, juice. It was that sort of thing that it was already a lean that, yeah, you're not going to make it. I think that has been contested, but at least I think that is what we got from Tubin, that not the fix, but they knew he was not going to be going back to no prison jumpsuit. Let's see. In fact, I get one more bonus share as opposed to commentary specifically from the notes from this section. So I said you see the same names over and over with all of these cases through and through in the area of Chicago. So this report: cops used torture. Probe details extensive abuse by Chicago police in the 70s, 80s. July 20. Former Chicago Police Commander John Burge led the torture of criminal suspects for 2 decades, and that's Vietnam vet John Burge, coercing dozens of confessions with fists, kicks, radiator burns, gun to the mouth. That's goon squad. Suck on it, nigger. Suck on it. Bags over the head and electric shock to the genitals, you privileged black male. Special prosecutors charged Wednesday. Concluding a 4-year probe, the prosecutors painted a portrait of a criminal justice system where top officials in a position to stop Burge, among them Mayor Richard Daley, when he served as Cook County State's attorney, appeared blind, to the abuse. But the prosecutors concluded it's too late to pursue charges against Burge or any of the other officers. Statutes of limitations have long since run out on the cases, which they said stretched from the 70s through the 80s. Prosecutors singled out for criticism former Chicago Police Superintendent Richard Breescheck, who served under Mayor Jane Byrne. Breescheck was guilty of dereliction of duty, failing to act in the early 1980s on suspicion that Burge and detectives under his command had mistreated prisoners, the prosecutor said. Breescheck publicly praised the detectives while privately harboring suspicions about their activities, the prosecutors allege. His inaction, they added, allowed the torture of criminal suspects to continue for years. There are cases we believe would justify our seeking indictments for mistreatment of prisoners by Chicago police officers, said the prosecutors Edward Egan and Robert Boyle. Their conclusions could find their way into civil lawsuits that former death row inmates have filed against Burge and the city. Officials at the State Appellate Defender's Office said they will study the report for evidence of additional wrongful convictions that might be appealed. Meanwhile, the Office of the U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald requested a copy of the 290-page report. The Justice Department during the Clinton administration had looked into torture allegations against Burge and determined they were too old to prosecute. It is not clear what Fitzgerald can do with the new information, but civil rights attorneys said it could provide a roadmap for prosecutions to investigate possible civil rights violations by Burge and others, including high-ranking officials who may have looked the other way. At the same time, however, the special prosecutors said their investigation raised doubts about torture claims leveled by a handful of former death row inmates pardoned by former Governor George Ryan, who said their confessions had been coerced by Burge. The special prosecutors said they did not believe Leroy come on. Woo! I don't believe nobody named Leroy anyway, so whatever. Sorry, Mr. Orange. Had been tortured and were suspicious the claims of Madison Hobley, Stanley Howard, and to a lesser degree, Aaron Patterson. Burge was fired by the Chicago Police Board in 1993 for allegedly torturing a murder suspect. He lives in Florida and still receives a monthly city pension of more than $3,400. Burge has consistently denied torture allegations. His lawyer, Richard T. Sykes, said Wednesday that Burge stands on that claim and pointed to the report's skepticism about some torture claims as partial validation. And I will stop there. I said, wow, Richard T. Sykes, attorney in this case as well, attorney for John Burge. Wow. If you are in the employ of racist man, racist woman, hey, business is always good. And they have a few reports about, his involvements with the Dealey case that is some years on. But man, so that's Ed Hanrahan and Judge Perry, where they get to all these different eras. Like, it would be something just to study the legal system in the city of Chicago for the past 50 years or so, all the way up through Rekia Boyd and all that. Anyway, let's see. Let me see. I'll get in a quick note. We'll check Confidant, and then we'll get to audio segment 2. Go back to the beginning of where we started at today. Oh man, gotta go back to chapter 13. Okay. Where did I get chapter 13? Tampering with the jury. Talked about that. As good as committed. Yep. Good as convicted. Yep, he flat out lied. I appreciate that Barbara is right there. Hey, nothing we can do about it now. Let's try to drive the vehicle safely, get to the residence, and we'll deal with things as best we can moving forward. That's about the best you can do under those circumstances. I mean, we are on the plantation. Let's see. When they convict him, and he's in the court sobbing and all the rest of it, man, I mean, really, that's kind of exactly what this system is set up for, and that's about the best you can do. Like, oh my goodness, I'm an attempted parent, attempted husband, like, oh my goodness, like, man, just, it's white people, please, the best you can do. Like, my goodness, I don't even, even though I didn't do anything, and I'm totally innocent, and you all have lied and all the rest of it, like, man, that's about the best I can do, and that is the system of white supremacy racism. So, despicable all around. Let's see. He starts chapter 14 when he said, my father had given me some words of warning. His parents his mom and dad have had such good advice all throughout the book. I really perked up. I was like, oh, they're going to have something really good to offer. And he says, ooh-wee, they going to get you, man. They send you to prison, or they will financially ruin you, and or both. And sometimes the prison, that's the financial ruin. So, I mean, they have so many means of terrorizing you. They have all of the resources of the system of white supremacy racism. I mean, everything. They have the IRS can audit you, and local charges, and I mean, they can totally unload on you, and even just wasting all of your time and energy. Most people don't have time and energy to just go to court all day long and every day. I mean, most people just don't have that time and energy. They can just wear you down. They can switch out. They can get new people to come in. If, Richard T. Sykes is busy, they can get somebody else and give him a vacation, and they can come in and go full-time on you. Let's see. He gets a teaspoon of help from the black female at the unemployment office, but, I mean, that's just going to be a teaspoon. Let's see. He gets the typewriter to write his book. That is kind of wild. I would have been, I think Miss Harris had talked about, is this a setup? Is this the typewriter that they use? So they're going to say, see, he did use a typewriter. That's it. All that, and then they figure out, oh, it's got this check in, and they want me to write a book, which, hey, now, I mean, if that was the signal that, ended up with us reading The Echo from Dealey Plaza, wow. Wackiest thing ever. But, I mean, hey, reading, writing, super important, especially for victims of white supremacy racism. Incidentally, he said he had that check in there for $2,100. The inflation calculator, that would be about $21,000 in 2025. So, sizable chunk of change, especially if you are hurting and don't have a job. $21,000 fall out of nowhere, even from suspected racists in Massachusetts. Hey, if Tom Brady or anybody else in New England wants to hook me up with $21,000, much obliged. Let's see. And he does have the document in here. I wish he'd put a picture of Frank W. Jones, maybe some of these other white people in here. Maybe he does. Maybe we have to keep reading. But that would have been cool, too. But he does have the document. Let's see. All of this, I mean, wow. Like, what does it mean to be classified as white? Like, Mark Furman, GED Mark Furman, taught us anything. Perjury is a crime. I think this is a felony that we're talking about. Like, you committed perjury in a felony trial? You're admitting this in a court of law under oath? Why isn't he being charged? Like, what's going on here? I don't understand. Like, and it wasn't no, pussyfooting or whatever. Are you saying that you committed perjury? Yep, that's what I'm saying. Mark Furman got convicted of perjury. Like, dang, why isn't he the one sweating like, ooh-wee, I'm going to have to make sure I got enough money in my piggy bank for that trial coming up, because I know I'm going to be looking at some perjury charges coming up quick, too. Doesn't seem like that happened at all. Let's see. And they had so many different types of lie. I even got my list to keep my lies straight. Like, wow, that's different. I don't even remember that from the O.J. Simpson trial, where people had a list to keep all the deception together. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I can stop right. This could have been my only note, and then we can get to section 2. We'll try Confidant again after the second audio segment. Mr. Bolden said, let me read the whole thing. He says, America in the 1960s, America, the country where 3 Freedom Riders had been kidnapped and murdered in Mississippi. He's talking about James Chaney and those 2 white boys. That's 1964. And where 4 little black girls had been blown up in their church in Alabama. Right in 1963. That's weeks after the March on Washington and 2 months before the assassination of President Kennedy. Racial tension boiled over in every corner of the country, metaphor, and that's kind of a tired metaphor, much more so since the assassination of John Kennedy, which many black Americans felt was connected to his vehement stance against racism. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. He says racial tension boiled up. I'm just looking at what he says here. The Freedom Rides, that happened while Kennedy was in the White House. The church bombing, Kennedy was in the White House. Medgar Evers was killed while Kennedy was in the White House. They had the Birmingham protests where Kennedy had to send federal troops into Alabama. That was before the assassination. I mean, I could just go on and on and on and on and on about bombings and killings and shoot. And Mahalia Jackson tried to kill her in Chicago. I mean, you can't do that. That doesn't even make sense. I don't think there's no evidence that would support that at all, that violence increased as a result of John F. Kennedy's assassination. I do not think that is true at all. Just look at the body count. That notwithstanding, where's the evidence that John Kennedy had taken some sort of vehement stance against racism? I don't even know what that means. I wouldn't even know what you're talking about. Like, what exactly? Him sending troops into Alabama? That was after black people started fighting back. Counter-violence. I don't even know what you're talking about exactly. Talking to Dr. King? What are you talking about? Like, vehement is more than just, we ought to be nicer to the niggers. Like, vehement is, hey, said Minister Malcolm, and particularly he said, many black, this is not a 1 or 2 like Shamika Harris, retired firefighter. He said many, like, you got large numbers of black people, like, man, that Kennedy was honored about some race. Really? I do know there were a lot of black people that liked him, but there were a lot of black people that felt Kennedy had taken a vehement stance against racism. If that is true, all I can say is, now one more time, not all white people is racist. And we are clearly in error about that. We will get to audio segment number 2. Confidant, take notes. More, lots more to come. The echo from Dealey Plaza, victim of white supremacy and privileged black male, Abraham Bolden, audio segment number 2.
I am going to enter them here because I am convinced that Bolden had a fair trial, Judge Perry declared. Bolden had 2 fair trials, and there is no question about his guilt. There is no reason for another trial. With that in mind, the new findings of fact are now entered. Ray Smith squeezed the sides of the lectern with his hands to calm himself. Your Honor, he began cautiously, so that we may be clear on this, in addition to denying the new trial, you are also denying the defendant a hearing in which evidence can be presented? I am denying a hearing because it is unnecessary, Judge Perry answered sharply. I know so much about the facts. Had one of the trials been before another judge, even there I would be able to examine the transcripts, but all 3 of the trials were before me, and I am very familiar with them in this instance. And are you denying a hearing in which we could call and subpoena witnesses, such as prosecutors? Smith continued, shooting a glance in Sykes' direction. Absolutely, the judge shot back. I am denying that because it is entirely unnecessary. It is just another roadblock as far as this court is concerned. There it was. Without one iota of testimony or offering of proof, Judge Perry ruled that Spagnoli's admission of perjury in a federal trial was nothing more than, in his words, a plot by the witness Spagnoli to discredit the United States of America in the administration of justice. It's hard to describe the rage I felt. A plot? Could anybody believe that Joseph Spagnoli would admit to committing perjury in a federal trial as part of a scheme to free me? And what about Richard Sykes, who never once contested Spagnoli's claims? He was in on it, too. He'd let the record stand that he met with Spagnoli at the Secret Service office between my 2 trials, and that he told Spagnoli that the service knew he was innocent of the counterfeiting charges, as Spagnoli claimed he had. Sykes would admit to criminal misconduct just so I could stay out of jail? There was a plot, all right, a scheme to lock me away, and Judge Perry appeared to be in on it. Whether it was the Secret Service he was protecting or his own judicial conduct, he had no intention of overturning my conviction. At no point in his testimony did Joseph Spagnoli give a specific time or date for his meeting with Sykes. Yet the following statement appears in Perry's findings of fact. That this court expressly finds that on the date upon which Joseph Spagnoli stated that he met Assistant United States Attorney Sykes at the offices of the United States Secret Service and had been informed by Assistant United States Attorney Sykes that he was not guilty of the charges in the D'Antonio case, Assistant United States Attorney Sykes was on trial before the court in another case in Freeport, Illinois, Western Division of the Northern District of Illinois. In one sentence, Judge Perry furnished an unsworn alibi for Sykes, and also acknowledged that a witness before him in a federal criminal trial had knowingly committed perjury, a crime for which neither Judge Perry nor anyone else made him answer. Judge Perry's findings of fact were more like his twists of fact. At one point, he wrote that the witness Joseph Spagnoli did not recant the substance of his testimony with respect to his meetings and conversations with Frank Jones, and the receipt of the information from the Secret Service in the case of United States v. D'Antonio et al. Of course he hadn't recanted. When Oliver had asked Spagnoli to give a full accounting of his perjury in my trial, so that he might purge himself of any impropriety, Judge Perry had quickly shut down the testimony, forbidding Spagnoli from providing any substantive detail. He says his evidence was false in another case, Judge Perry had ruled. We are not going into what it was. Judge Perry even went so far as to claim that I told Mr. Oliver not to go into that subject matter, and he worked up a scheme to get it in by the back door on redirect, so as to let it appear that he himself was not in contempt of court. Ray Smith was finally getting the picture. He had heard of Judge Perry's statements about my guilt in the first trial and about his locking us out of the courthouse while the jury deliberated in the second. Now he listened as Judge Perry manipulated the facts surrounding Spagnoli's admissions to prevent us from using them in support of my innocence. I can't see how the Circuit Court of Appeals could do anything but reverse Judge Perry, a stunned Smith said as we left the federal building. "We're really fighting Judge Perry now, aren't we?" I asked. "How do you mean, Abe?" "Well, I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand it, we now have to show that Judge Perry abused his discretion as a sitting judge, don't we?" "Yeah, that's right. I think we can show that happened in many instances in your case," Smith answered. "The judge has filed his findings of fact and conclusions of law, and unless they contain glaring indiscretions, aren't they almost impossible to overturn? These judges are members of the same legal organizations, visit each other's homes, and go to conferences, parties, and banquets with each other. When push comes to shove, they're going to stick up for one another," I said. Smith seemed irritated by my questions and by my cynicism. "Let me handle it," he said sharply. "I'll take care of it, and we will come out all right." Again, I found that I couldn't share my lawyer's confidence. The Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals had a reputation for being fairly tough, reversing very few of the cases sent to them for review. Smith had already filed portions of the appeal, and now the only thing we could do was wait until the time came for oral arguments. At least I could turn my attention to finding some work. Chapter 15. By October 1965, when our case came before the United States Court of Appeals, Ray Smith had grown even more convinced that we would prevail. He and I met several times since the hearing before Judge Perry, and he had mapped out his plan of action. When I arrived back in court at the federal building for oral arguments in the appeal, Ray Smith was already there, with James Ward again seated beside him. The government had sent a young lawyer named John Powers Crowley, who had shown himself to be skillful and successful in appeals courts. The Honorable Chief Judge John Hastings presided. Circuit Judges Winfred Knock and Luther Swigert made up the rest of the panel. All were senior jurists, white men in late middle age. Earlier, Ray Smith had told me that he hoped not to have to argue before either Hastings or Swigert, both conservative Republicans. As the appellants, we opened the proceedings. Smith vigorously attacked both the credibility of Joseph Spagnoli and the prejudicial conduct of Judge Perry, arguing that denying me a new trial before a different judge after Judge Perry had told the jury his opinion about my guilt had violated my rights to due process. But it was Smith's allegation that Richard Sykes had suborned perjury from Joseph Spagnoli that really got the judge's attention. "I noticed that you raised the issue of government-solicited perjury in your brief," said Judge Hastings with apparent irritation. "Are you saying that you charged the government attorney with knowingly soliciting perjury in a federal criminal trial?" "Your Honor, we raised this issue of Spagnoli's perjury in the arguments for a new trial in the court below. Attorney Sykes has filed affidavits denying some of the points that we have raised on appeal, but he has been mysteriously silent on this issue of assisting and aiding Spagnoli's perjury in the trial below," Smith responded. Judge Swigert challenged Smith immediately. "Are you standing there and telling this panel that you believe the government solicited perjury in a federal criminal trial?" "I'm not telling this court what I believe or what I do not believe," answered Smith, holding his ground. "I am telling this court that the accusation was made under oath by Joseph Spagnoli, and the assertion is a matter of record in the D'Antonio trial below. I am further advising this honorable court that Attorney Sykes has been given the opportunity on at least 2 occasions to answer the accusation, but he has failed to do so. There is no denial of the assertion by Joseph Spagnoli anywhere in the record, and to this day, the accusation remains unanswered by anyone in the government prosecutor's office. We feel—" "These are very serious charges," interrupted Chief Judge Hastings. "These charges could land someone in prison, and I am going to get to the bottom of this now. We are going to suspend these arguments in this case at this time, and we will summon Attorney Sykes before this court. Attorney Crowley, you will let the U.S. Attorney know that Attorney Sykes must appear before this court immediately so that we may clear up this matter once and for all." Crowley rose and quickly left the room. A few short minutes later, he returned with Richard Sykes and Edward Hanrahan, all out of breath from having rushed to the courtroom. Judge Hastings summoned Sykes to the podium. "Attorney Sykes, we are hearing arguments in United States versus Abraham Bolden. I am sure you are familiar with the details of that case, are you not?" "Yes, I am, Your Honor." Sykes seemed to lack his usual bravado. "Well, it has been brought to this court's attention during the oral arguments of the case that one of the witnesses against the defendant has accused you of soliciting perjured testimony that was given in the trial. I called you here so that you may personally answer the accusation. The counsel for this defendant has stated in his brief and during oral argument that you have failed to answer this serious question that reflects negatively on the United States government." Hastings dramatically emphasized his last piece. "Now, I ask you, did you solicit perjured testimony by one witness, Joseph Spagnoli, in any of the Bolden trials in the court below?" Sykes shifted his weight from one foot to another, nervously. "Your Honor, I want to say—" "The question can be answered yes or no," Hastings interrupted. "Either you did or you did not. This question needs to be answered now so that this court can make a fair ruling concerning this issue on appeal. I ask the question again. Did you solicit perjured testimony by Joseph Spagnoli in any of the Bolden trials before the court of District Judge J. San Perry?" Sykes swallowed hard. He glanced over his shoulder at his colleagues, Crowley and Hanrahan. "Your Honor," he finally said, "I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that my answer might tend to incriminate me." "You are refusing to answer on the grounds of self-incrimination?" the Chief Judge asked in a loud voice. "Yes, sir, Your Honor," said Sykes, lowering his eyes. "Very well, then, we will look into this matter, and depending on what this court finds, someone might go to prison. We are going to get to the bottom of this," Hastings declared to the shocked spectators in the courtroom. He turned to Attorney Smith and asked, "Based upon the allegations of Joseph Spagnoli, do you think that the assistant government attorney should be prosecuted and incarcerated?" Smith was taken aback by the question. "Your Honor, such a decision is for this court. I'm asking you what you think we should do in this case," shot back Hastings. "I'm asking you as an officer of the court and a member of the bar." "Your Honor, I have no recommendations as to the actions that this honorable court should exercise. This court is well aware of the seriousness of the allegations made under oath by witness Spagnoli. My client has been unlawfully convicted of a crime in the court below, and the government attorney has refused to answer the allegations made by the witness. At the least, this case should be referred back to the court below for a retrial of the issues." "So you have no opinion as to the course that we should take as to the government attorney?" "No, sir." "Very well. We will proceed with the argument of this case." Crowley took over the podium and impressively presented the government's arguments, never once mentioning the issue of Spagnoli's perjury. He closed by declaring that I had received a fair trial in every instance before Judge Perry, and asking the appeals court to affirm my conviction. On the way out of the courtroom, the many attorneys in attendance came up to us, all of them excited about our apparent triumph. For a federal prosecutor to take the fifth in such circumstances was unprecedented. "You guys got it made," one lawyer said. "Your case is as good as reversed. I can't see how the court could do anything else with what I've just seen happen in here." Another attorney clapped Ray Smith on the shoulder and said, "I sure wish that my case was as sure a reversal as your client's case is. You can start preparing for a new trial." Just then, a loud voice cut through the din in the corridor outside the courtroom. "Attorney Smith!" I looked up to see U.S. Attorney Edward Hanrahan walking hurriedly toward us. He and Smith moved a bit off to the side for a private, and, from the look of it, none too friendly chat. Hanrahan, with a scowl on his face, seemed to be lecturing Smith, shaking a finger in Smith's face as he spoke. When Hanrahan was done talking with Smith, he stalked off, and Smith walked slowly back toward me, frowning. "That son of a gun just threatened me," he said under his breath. "He actually threatened me. I've never had anything like that happen to me before." Ray Smith had just had his baptism in my case. For me, I once again found myself with nothing to do but wait for the appeals panel to hand down their decision. It had been somewhat comforting to hear the encouraging reactions of all those seasoned courthouse veterans after the oral arguments for the appeal, but even at the time, I saw Sykes's refusal to answer the court as both good news and bad news for me. The good news was that it made clear to the court that Spagnoli's accusations had some kind of merit and were more than just some scheme to get me off the hook. The bad news was that now my going free, or even getting a new trial, would be tied to some kind of official reprimand of Sykes for assisting perjury in a federal criminal trial. If it ruled in my favor, the court would have to voice its official condemnation of Sykes. Any such finding would trigger investigations by the Bar Association or Judicial Oversight Committee, and would surely end the career of a budding young white lawyer in the Justice Department. In the early winter of 1965, I couldn't see those three conservative white justices ruining the career of a promising young lawyer by overturning the conviction on a charge of judicial misconduct. A week before Christmas, Attorney Smith called. His grim tone of voice immediately told me everything I needed to know. "I just got word from the Court of Appeals that they affirmed your conviction." "You've got to be kidding," I blurted out, even though I knew he wasn't. "I don't see how they could have confirmed your conviction in spite of Attorney Sykes taking the Fifth Amendment during the argument, but they did. They didn't even comment on some of the constitutional issues that we raised." Smith had been one of those who assumed a reversal by the Court of Appeals was inevitable. "I'm going to ask that the full panel of 9 judges hear this appeal," he asserted. Smith was ready to keep fighting, and Barbara, as she later told me, was prepared to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. "I'll start preparing the petition for a hearing en banc. In the meantime, I'll run off a copy of the decision by the court and give it to you when you come to my office." We agreed to get together just after the holidays. A few days into January 1966, I went down to Smith's office to read the decision. I was not naive, and I understood that reasonable people can differ in their interpretations. I also realized that the law is not absolute, that in the end, the laws as written will mean whatever judges say they mean, or whatever a clever lawyer can convince a jury they mean. In this situation, we didn't need the appeals court to dismiss all the charges or completely exonerate me. We only needed them to say that there were enough irregularities in my trials or that sufficient new evidence had surfaced to put the fairness of the verdicts in doubt, and thus warrant a new trial with an impartial judge where all the evidence could be heard in open court. The appeals court opinion brilliantly danced around all the substantive issues and all the constitutional questions Smith had raised in his brief and in his oral argument. Maybe we were just deluding ourselves and no improprieties had ever occurred. Maybe the appeals court just didn't feel the 2 trials had been unfair enough to waste time and money on a 3rd trial. Maybe the judges just couldn't believe that some of their own had done anything so obviously corrupt. Whatever the reason, the court chose to leave matters as they stood. Most glaring was the omission of any mention of Sykes having taken the Fifth during oral arguments and refusing to ever answer Spagnoli's charges directly. Referring to Spagnoli's charge that Sykes had told him to lie about his source of income in my trial so that he might look good before the jury, the Court of Appeals wrote that Spagnoli's livelihood was clearly a collateral matter bearing upon his credibility. His credibility, in turn, had been adequately put before the jury. We do not believe that the jury's overall appraisal of this witness would have been substantially affected by the knowledge that he was being less than forthright concerning his source of income. As for Spagnoli's admission that he had perjured himself at the request of the government with respect to Martineau, the court found that the record amply supports the district judge's findings that the conflicting evidence with reference to the specific date of that contact was thoroughly explored at the Bolden trial. They found that neither Judge Perry's statement to the first jury that he believed the evidence sustained a verdict of guilty, nor the refusal to grant a change of judge after that statement showed that the judge had a personal bias. Citing a prior ruling, the appeals court wrote, "Trial judges are invariably called upon to conduct impartial trials despite whatever opinion they may have. We cannot see how the exercise of that discretion in one trial, without more, could necessarily result in prejudice against an accused in a second trial." Further, the appeals panel found that, prior to the second trial, defense counsel moved for a substitution of judges on the grounds of prejudice. The motion was denied. The defendant says that the motion should have been granted, that since the judge had expressed an opinion of guilt, an impartial trial before the same judge was impossible. The defendant significantly cites no authority for his proposition, nor do we find any merit in it. Our appeal rested not on whether Judge Perry had a personal bias against me, but on whether, having formed an opinion and issued a judicial finding as to my guilt to the sitting jury, he should have removed himself from hearing the second trial. The appeals court did not address this question, failing to deal with the constitutional issues. The appeals panel noted that the trial judge clearly informed the jury that his opinion could be entirely disregarded. However, Judge Perry referred to his own opinion as a finding, and a judge's finding is a judicial conclusion that a jury cannot disregard. Moreover, there is no way that a typed transcript could capture the cold, hostile tone of the judge's courtroom statements. No one who heard the judge that day could have doubted that Judge Perry wanted me found guilty. I thought back to that day in front of the three judges hearing our appeal. I could see Richard Sykes nervously swallowing and stammering and weaseling out of answering any direct questions regarding his suborning perjury. I wondered how different things would have been if he had been a rising young black attorney and I had been a white government agent with a spotless record. The black attorney certainly never would practice law again, even if he was lucky enough to stay out of jail. At that point in my case, a third trial almost certainly would have ended in an acquittal. And for that to happen, the jury and the court would need to believe the government played a role in setting me up. That would have brought the Secret Service under scrutiny again, and lend credence to all the allegations I had been making for years regarding the dereliction of misconduct of the agents surrounding John Kennedy in Dallas. There was no doubt in my mind about what was at stake. My conviction had to stand undisturbed in order to silence the echo from Dealey Plaza. I knew this in my heart, but I couldn't give up the fight. Ray Smith filed his motion for review by the full panel of appellate court judges in February 1966. Edward Hanrahan personally wrote the government's brief in opposition to our request. His argument rested, in part, on Smith's hesitancy to recommend legal action against Sykes during the oral argument. "The government," Hanrahan wrote, "does feel that comment is imperative regarding the defendant's reiterated contention that Assistant United States Attorney Richard T. Sykes suborned perjury in order to secure defendant's conviction. When that scurrilous accusation was suggested in oral argument before the original panel, defendant's counsel was asked no less than 3 times whether Mr. Sykes should be prosecuted and incarcerated as a consequence of defendant's gratuitously assumed but unsubstantiated charge. Significantly, defendant's counsel never answered those questions unequivocally. Rather, he persisted in evading the responsive answer that both respect for his duty as an officer of this court and concern for the integrity of the bar would require. Moreover, defendant's assertion is contrary to fact and completely rebutted by the credible evidence as determined by the trial court's findings of fact. Therefore, defendant's allegation is not only a factual issue improperly re-argued in this petition, but also is reprehensible conduct utterly incongruous with practice before any court and merits judicial sanction. Richard T. Sykes was naturally one of the signatories on the brief. It wasn't long before we received notification that the motion for a rehearing before the full court had been denied. When Ray Smith called, angry and dejected, to tell me of the court's decision, we went over my options. I really only had two left. Either I had to appeal the decision to the Supreme Court, or I had to surrender to the U.S. Marshal's office and begin serving the 6-year sentence handed down by Judge Perry. If I chose to continue the appeal, we only had a week in which to file for a writ of certiorari from the Supreme Court. Ray explained that the next level of appeal would mean another $5,000 or so in fees, primarily for the printing of briefs, since most of the research had already been done. By that time, I had landed a position managing the midnight shift at the Ingersoll Products Factory. As it happened, the job was going well for me, and I had the impression that the company had plans for my future. Barbara, too, had improved her situation with a better-paying position at the Nabisco Company. But my beautiful and determined young wife did not need the security of some additional income to know what course of action to take. Without even blinking an eye, she insisted I go ahead and appeal to the Supreme Court. I phoned Ray Smith and told him to go ahead and file the papers. And once again, we got on with the business of waiting. On June 28, 1966, a bright summer day in Chicago, we learned that the U.S. Supreme Court had denied our application for a writ of certiorari and would not hear the case. Smith said that Justice William O. Douglas had written a brief statement saying the court should hear the case because there were substantial violations of my constitutional rights that needed review. Smith told me that he was preparing an emergency motion to present to Justice Douglas, asking the court to rehear our petition in light of his statement. At 2:30 p.m. the next afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened the front door to find 2 U.S. Marshals. "Mr. Bolden," said Marshal Lowe, a man I knew a little through our law enforcement work, "we are here to carry out the mandate of the United States Court of Appeals. Your appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court has been denied, and Judge Perry has ordered your immediate incarceration." I had no idea what was going on. "I need to call my attorney. I talked to him yesterday, and he said that we were going to ask the Supreme Court to reconsider. That's what my attorney told me yesterday." "You can call him if you want to," Lowe said, "but that's not going to change anything. Judge Perry has ordered that you be locked up today before 4 p.m. When I got Smith on the phone, he was just as shocked as I was. "Normally, they give you a few weeks before the mandate is enforced. Judges usually give defendants a few weeks to clear up their business before sending them off to prison." "Well, they're here right now to take me to jail. What should I do?" "You'll have to go with them, Abe, if they have a copy of the court's order. You don't have any choice other than to go. They'll probably house you in a safe place like the Wheaton County Jail. You have to be brought to court before Judge Perry tomorrow before they send you to a federal penitentiary. That's usually the procedure. I'll meet you in court tomorrow," Smith said sorrowfully. I hung up and immediately called Barbara, who raced home from work, arriving just in time to embrace me before Lowe's patience ran out. "Okay, let's go," he said as he reached under his coat for his handcuffs. "Where are you taking him?" Barbara asked. "He'll be in the Cook County Jail. Keep in contact with your attorney. He should know where your husband is at all times." I turned to Marshal Lowe. "Are you going to handcuff me in front of my wife and children? I've worked with you in the past. You know I'm not going to try to run now or resist. What sense would that make now?" "I have to follow regulations," Lowe said as he secured the cuffs around my wrists. He led me outside, down the steps of our house, and along the walkway past 2 rows of green hedges. As we got into the waiting car, I looked back at my home and at my wife and thought of the steel box, the woman, and the 3 little children of my dream.
Black male privilege. Chicago. Katherine Massey book clubs. We'll pick up there next week. It's chapter 15, kind of midway into it. I think we should be done in 3 weeks. 3 sessions, new pick. The number to dial, 605-313-5164. The code, 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Richard T. Sykes here says, it's a young white man. You got decades of racism to be practiced. And you start out right here, lying. We're going to get that old Bolden, get him in jail, trying to make us look bad, Secret Service, and rat us out for drinking and being racist, saying we didn't like old nigger-loving Kennedy, racist suspect, saying we didn't like him and we were going to blow his brains out, fix your wagon. And Richard T. Sykes, I'm a young white man, you're going to ruin my career talking about I didn't solicited perjury. No. I served racist man, racist woman for almost 50 years. And then they get to John Burge. No. I got John. You're a Vietnam veteran. You're a hero. You don't talk about he put electric shocks on Leroy's genitals. I don't even believe that. Leroy lying. You know he lying. You don't say he tortured. You don't say he beat, kicked, shocked, tased. All these Leroy. Lies. Bolden lied. Leroy lied. They lied. You got a Vietnam veteran. I got you, John. And he did have John Burge's back because John Burge was never convicted of no torture. The only thing John Burge was ever convicted for, lying. That's it. Nothing else. So they did have his back. Any hoodles, 605-313-5164. The code, 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. There should be books on, I was looking, there should be like a counter-racist biography on Ed Hanrahan. There should be a counter-racist biography on Judge Joseph Sam Perry. Counter-racist biography on Richard T. Sykes. Like, man, just that alone for all those major cases that they touched, and that's not even getting to the other Leroys in there. Negro, black male, privilege, don't have no Johnny Cochran that you would never hear of. How many of them that they, boom, 30 years, boom, 20 years, but he tased my genitals, I didn't do that, boom, stop lying, 30 years, boom, 40 years. How many of those went on over there, 40 years with all that discretion and white power, and you got a public defendant who fell asleep during the trial? Chicago. Let's see. The Confidant. We'll try again. Let's see if it works.
Can I be heard?
Up. Woo!
Greetings, Gus, and other listeners and callers. I'm struggling, but I guess I'm getting somewhere finally with my microphone, so thanks for your help. Just to start with a few observations from this last reading is Judge Perry, he is a major gangster, and his, the power that he's wielding in the system of racism and white supremacy is impressive. I mean, he's basically dictating the outcome of Mr. Bolden's life in terms of prison, sentencing, and so on, single-handedly almost. So it seems, except for the Voltron effect, where the system of racism, white supremacy is also supportive of what Judge Perry is doing, apparently. Let's see what I have here. What astonished me was Ray Smith's astonishment that Judge Perry, let's see, he says, Ray Smith weaves the sides of the lectern in his hands to, Your Honor, he began cautiously, so that we may be clear on this. In addition to denying the new trial, you are also denying the defendant a hearing in which evidence can be presented. And the judge says, absolutely. Brazen. Let's see here. And let's see. I'll try to be quick. I know we have it. I can't describe the rage I felt. Could anybody believe that Joseph Spagnoli would admit to committing perjury in a federal trial as a part of a scheme to free me? So his logic is working. He's seeing pretty much his fate, but he's not absolutely certain at this point. But it is a plot, and it is a scheme, and they're determined to have Bolden incarcerated. I wanted to point out the judicial overreach of Judge Spinelli and the system of racism, white supremacy, the major abuse of power all along the way. Judge Perry quickly, on page 211, quickly shut down the testimony forbidding Spagnoli from providing any substantive detail. So he's basically running roughshod over what they call the justice system. Let's see here. Let me get a few more points in. I'm not a lawyer. Let's see here. The judge, that's fine. Let's see, it's getting late. Let me stop there for now, because I had some more points, but I'd like to hear some of the other comments as well.
Much obliged. Glad we got the audio working correctly. The confidant. Let's see, Miss Harris, retired firefighter, should be with us as well. Certainly, what the confidant, I'll say quickly, computers and automation. Mae Brussel mentioned this. It's a trade magazine, Computer Geeks, but they ended up printing a lot of articles about the JFK assassination, COINTELPRO, Abraham Bolden, lots of Black Panther Party, just in a computer magazine in the middle of the very early 70s, and this went on for a while, for years. But one of the articles that Mae Brussel points to, when this magazine started questioning the JFK assassination and saying that we do not believe this was one Lee Harvey Oswald did this looks way suspicious. One of the first articles that they published on the JFK assassination, they start with the word conspiracy, and they lead with the evidence. This is a computer journal now, so they lead with the evidence shows that for many decades white people conspired to lynch Negroes. That's how they break down conspiracy to assassinate JFK. In computers and automation, I fell out in the floor, because it was like nerd computer detailed about what does a conspiracy mean, and the evidence shows that for decades white people have conspired to lynch black people, and that's their start point for, yes, conspiracy to kill JFK. Where did you get that from? The greatest journalist in the history of the world, suspected racist Mae Brussel, who did predict Jonestown, and all of that work started with JFK assassination. And she talked about Abraham Bolden. It's so wacky. She talked about Abraham Bolden, but she is still ahead of us in talking about Abraham Bolden, so we have to get a little bit further into the book, and then we can play that too. But like, man, I wish I had studied JFK more, because it would just be, oh, racists killed JFK, and you just go to the evidence. Maybe you get more people interested in replacing white supremacy with justice if they process things that way. But that is a stunning article from Computers and Automation about conspiracies, which you have in this case too. White people conspiring to that Bolden that we got. But you see all levels, Secret Service, local prosecutors, local police, we all in this together. We got this nigger. Ms. Harris, retired firefighter. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Okay, I just have one quick thing before we get to session 2. When you were reading that segment from George Howard's book, it said that Abraham Bolden served 4 years in prison, unless I wrote that down wrong. But I thought he served just 4 months shy of his 6-year sentence, so that would be 5 years, 8 months. I don't know, that's an inconsistency. I'm not sure which one is that. This text right here, though, says 4 years shy of the 6-year sentence. Okay, so for session 2, at the beginning, it was like the Judge Perry was done. He told Smith that he had taken into consideration every statement made by both attorneys and was about to enter a decision on the motion for a new trial by way of written opinion containing his findings of fact and conclusions of law. I am going to enter them here because I am convinced that Bolden had a fair trial, Judge Perry declared. Bolden had 2 fair trials, and there is no question about his guilt. There's no reason for another trial. With that in mind, the new findings of fact are now entered. So he's just like, all right, well, I have said it. Now it's a fact. And a finding, too, I guess. So, this section, I had a lot of highlights, but not a lot of comments. I think the text kind of spoke for itself. It's probably a metaphor, but let me see. Okay. He says, I noticed that you raised the issue of government-solicited perjury in your briefs, said Judge Hastings with apparent irritation. Are you saying that you charged a government attorney with knowingly soliciting perjury in a federal trial? So, and he did this twice. Later on, Judge Schweiker challenged Smith immediately. Are you standing there and telling this panel that you believe that the government solicited perjury in a federal trial? And, you know, the lawyer's like, hey, I'm not telling the court that I believe this or, you know, what I do not believe. You know, but he'll say one thing, and then they'll ask him a question. Are you saying this other thing? And that's super slick, and it's something that white people do a lot. Well, they do it in a skillful manner. Non-white people do it, I think, out of confusion. Okay. So then the judge asked the new attorney, Attorney Smith. He turned to Attorney Smith and asked, based upon the allegations of Joseph Spagnoli, do you think that the assistant government attorney should be prosecuted and incarcerated? Now, I was kind of surprised when he asked that question. Attorney Smith, he didn't really have an answer for that. He said he didn't have an opinion, but I did not understand why he asked that question. But then later on, he came back. He's like, hey, I asked the question 3 times, and he wouldn't say that he should be prosecuted and convicted. So another slick usage of words. Mr. Bolden said, I was not naive, and I understood that reasonable people can differ in their interpretations. I also realized that the law is not absolute, that in the end, the laws as written will mean whatever judges say they mean or whatever a clever lawyer can convince a jury they mean. In this situation, we didn't need the appeals court to dismiss all the charges or completely exonerate me. We only needed them to say that there were enough irregularities in my trials or that sufficient new evidence had surfaced to put the fairness of the verdicts in doubt, and thus warrant a new trial with an impartial judge where all the evidence could be heard in open court. Like, I super agree with what he just said, and that's exactly why he's not going to get a new trial. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all. I have one more thing. I checked. I went and looked at some video, and it was law enforcement officers standing behind O.J. Simpson when they read that verdict. So they were ready for the guilty. And that's all I have for now. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak.
They were disappointed that day, Brother Juice. Disappointed that day, if they were. They might have been standing there to make sure people didn't go crazy. Like, what? And what? Exonerate? What? What do you mean not get? I'm gonna get. You gotta stand there to. Hey, back up. Jury has spoken. Shh. Anyway, OJ did come out to Chicago. That is tangentially. Remember, he came out there, hid the knife, and then that's how he got away with it. That's how he got to. Doesn't fit and doesn't. You got to acquit. Let's see, retired firefighter, did you have commentary?
Yes, but I was occupied into some other things at the same time. But there's a few things that was on my mind about what I was hearing in the last session. I was just thinking that Mr. Bolden could have actually shortened the book into the trial and how it was going, because I would guess everybody can pick up that the white supremacists, who are quite professional and thorough on how to mistreat people in all different areas of activity, were set on sending him to jail, and basically that is what I think everybody can figure out. Also, at the same time, in my thinking through my studies about what happened on the Dealey Plaza, you talk about some very powerful groups that were involved into silencing any thoughts that would interfere with the Lee Harvey Oswald, one gunman type of situation. And here is a black male in the early 1960s, openly talking different from what, and he's involved right on the job where some of the inconsistencies was taking place. He is fortunate that he is still alive, let alone talking about a trial that was going on. And so those thoughts came through my mind, because they even, now I don't know if any white people that had to go through what he went through as far as trial is concerned. That's not to my knowledge of any white person, but there were some white people who were questioned, mysteriously passed away, that was saying something different than what was in the Warren Commission. Last but not least, Mr. Ed, once again, is back at it, Miami native like myself. And so by the time he got to Chairman Fred, he was well experienced on harming people. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. Heard Ed Hadamhan put his finger in that white man's face. His attorney Ray Smith said, "Well, look here." Well, I guess we didn't get to hear what he said. He said, "That son of a gun threatened me." I wish we could have got more details. Like, is this like a, meet me outside? Hey, this might even be another, hey, if you are white, you cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. You will be threatened by Ed Hanrahan outside the courtroom, no less. He didn't even let's step outside right quick. He grabbed him and put his finger, "Look here, you nigger lover. Bolden is going to prison, maybe worse, and you better act right, or hey, we swango you, put William O'Neill out here and put something in your Coca-Cola. Act right." Like, that son of a gun been threatened. You can't be ignorant about white supremacy, racism as a white man. Ever, as a white man, white woman, white child. Learn quick. Great point as well, Miss Harris, about the discrepancy in years. I can only say, if I had to serve like 30 J's in greater confinement, or even do what is like the weekend thing they give you sometime, I wouldn't care what it is. If I got to be there at all for 2 days, let's get it accurate. Don't round down or nothing. If I had to be there for 2 days, we don't want to say, well, he only had to be in greater confinement for about 2 hours. 2 days? 2 days, don't minimize. 2 days, that's 48 hours. Don't minimize. Like, Jesus Christ, if I was in there for almost 6 years, don't you cut Mary a day off. Particularly, I was in there for what? Trying to practice justice? And I can't say, I totally agree with the retired firefighter. It can't be stated enough. I think they intended to kill Mr. Bolden, and we might even get more detail on that as we go out the last third of the book or so, but I totally think he was supposed to. I even keep going back to that when Black Brother came up and said, "Hey, I got a gun. You want me to go and take it? I'll shoot him if you want me to do it." And his attorney, Mr. Howard, had already said, "Man, wait, what are you doing? Get out there." I think that right there, that could have been one of probably many times where we can totally get rid of him. They had a battle over the gun or drug dispute or whatever, and I had to shoot him, Maybe I had to shoot both of them. 2 niggers gone. Whoopee. Let's see. Email number 2. Chapter 13, the Secret Service had its conviction. I had no doubt they'd try to discredit me further if they could, to destroy any last bit of respect or credibility. Don't leave out killing you. Can't say it enough. I totally think they intended to kill him. Chapter 14. Unemployment office, middle-aged black female, government salary does not qualify you for unemployment compensation. I will try to help you get a job. Trying to assist non-white victims should be part of our code, even though our resources are limited. Agreed. Seconded. 2. My 30th birthday, how tragic to undergo this much at such a young age. Indeed, he had gone through quite a bit. Man, I guess maybe that all those challenges, maybe that's why he was having that premonition, like, ooh, we might not live to 30. Like, oh, and I mean, hey, we keep saying, like, I think, yeah, they were intended. He ain't gonna see 30. We gonna get Bolden. Like the conviction, that's just, step 1. We gonna get Bolden. Let's see. 3. I think you and children get better support if I'm not here. I'm not going on aid or anything like that. Barbara responded defiantly. I think you should stay out as long as you can. So emblematic of the system of racism, white supremacy, encouraging separation of the black male from his care unit. And that's been set up like that for a long time. Set up by who? Usual suspects. More resources are available if the black male is out of here, and or we do not offer resources to black males. That's why Off the Wall is off the wall at the Chicago Unemployment Office, sitting next to Fuller. Let's see. 4. You should type your story. It was signed Bill. His address and telephone number were neatly printed below his name. When I went to throw out the shipping box, found 2100. Classified as white, I presume. Miss Harris said the same. Spagnoli had just admitted that he committed perjury against you in trials. Are you telling this court now under oath you lied in the Bolden trial? Yes, sir. What a shock. A criminal lied under oath. The prosecutors knew he was lying in the first trial. Probably. Smith was new to this case, and he was white. He had been a prosecutor himself and probably couldn't fathom how deeply corrupt the system was, at least in this case. White people are not ignorant about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, especially not a white attorney. One, you've had to go to a lot of school, presumably, wink, wink, but you've had to go to a lot of school or at least sat in class or been close to a school from time to time, and then actually once you get on the job for your OJT training, man, everything that you see, what did I just say? You've seen Judge Perry sit up here, bump, 30 years, bump, 40 years, bump, 50 years. You know how this works. Way better than Bolden. Bolden's, you're not an attorney. I know what this is. And we noted that before, where he'll speak for white people's thoughts and, like he's so naive and he didn't. How do you know? You don't know what he's seen. Let's see. Racial tension 7 boiled over in every corner of the country. Metaphors, are they necessary? In other words, people classified as white continue to practice racism, white supremacy, white terrorism everywhere in the U.S. as they had done for centuries. Facts. That's why I said I don't think it was accurate to say that it was more racism, because this is the passage where he says there was more racism as a result of Kennedy's assassination. I was like, VGQ. 8. Dirksen's Federal Building for the hearing suspected racist Everett Dirksen, 1896 to 1969, Republican Congressman, House of Representatives, and Senator, helped to write the civil rights legislation of 1964 and 65, ode to Kennedy. 9. These judges are members of the same legal organization, visit each other's homes, and go to conferences, parties, and banquets with each other. When push comes to shove, they're going to stick up for one another. I said. Smith seemed irritated by my questions and by my cynicism. Let me handle it, he said sharply. I'll take care of it, and we'll come out all right. Mr. Bolden is gaining clarity about what he is up against. His suspect racist lawyer knows what he says is true, but remains on code, supporting the deception, which is so crucial to maintaining the system of racism, white supremacy. And it's kind of sad. This happened both times with his attorneys, but I think Mr. Howard, by the second trial, he got it. That's when he was saying, man, Abe, they will kill you, which is what we've been saying, like, they will kill you. Forget the conviction. You got way bigger problems. Like, these are real powerful white people. Put Kennedy's brains in the street, they can do the same thing to you. Let's see. Chapter 15. Sykes swallowed hard. He glanced over his shoulder at his colleagues, Crowley and Hanrahan. Your Honor, he finally answered, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that my answer might lead to incriminate me. I'm no lawyer, but as a layperson, this seems to be enough to get an acquittal or at the very least a retrial. Well, you are not a lawyer, Nigra. But man, Mark Furman did get convicted of perjury. I mean, WTH. What in the? But I mean, it's so much. There's so many irregularities with this. Like, they got chunks of the transcript that where did the part where the judge said, hey, things disappear, records, we can't find everything now. Wait, he said that he lied and y'all got, whoo, man, you got I've never even seen that. You got a list to keep track of my lies when we go to court. Man. Wackiness. Let's see. Based on the allegations of Joseph Spagnoli, do you think the assistant government attorney should be prosecuted and incarcerated? Your Honor, such a decision is for this court. I'm asking you what you think we should do in this case, shot back Hastings. I'm asking you as an officer of the court and a member of the bar. Your Honor, I have no recommendations as to the actions that this honorable court should exercise. I'm no lawyer, but this seems like an absurd question that only a judge should determine. It seems as if the judge is trying to trap the defense lawyer in a case of misconduct and get him disbarred. I said so much of this is just, I guess when you are the legal arm of white supremacy, you just make up what you want. That's why there's no such thing as justice. They don't even try to define it. We just make up whatever we want as we go. I was thinking about this in a work context where like a boss or a CEO will come to like the custodial worker or somebody who is not in a position of power at all, some nigger. Hey, Leroy, do you think we ought to fire Bob? You're like, what? I did. What do you mean? I didn't hire Bob. I don't know nothing about what Bob did. If you don't ask my opinion about, hiring or firing anybody else, like, what do you need my input for? That's what it kind of remind me of. Like, I'm here to advocate for my client, try to get him either totally get these bogus charges dropped, or at minimum, let's just start over, get a new trial, and ditch Judge Perry. That's the minimum that we're trying, not who we need to prosecute and all that. Like, come on. Now, I can say, I think I have heard attorneys recommend sanctions if there's been some sort of misconduct on the part of an attorney, defense, or prosecution in the case. I have heard that, so I don't know if he wanted, yes, there should be some sort of sanctions or whatever, if they wanted that sort of affirmative, but that's not really what we're here for. I'm here to advocate for my client, not to, advocate for whatever punitive actions should be taken against people for perjury. Although, like I said, now I do think for O.J. Simpson, I do think there was some recommended, like, hey, perjury, we should be charged. What is going on here? And he was prosecuted and convicted for perjury, so rightly so. 4, I just got word from appeals that they affirmed your conviction. You've got to be kidding. I blurted out even though I knew he wasn't. I wondered how different things would have been if he'd been a rising young black attorney and I'd been a white government agent with a spotless record. Mr. Bolden is shocked by this. If you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else you do understand will only confuse you. Yeah. I looked up to see U.S. Attorney Ed Hanrahan walking slowly to us. He and Smith moved a bit off to the side, lecturing Smith. That son of a gun just threatened. I wonder if he said son of the, Bolden is kind of religious in his elder years. We're totally fine. I'm not criticizing. I'm wondering if he maybe made it G-rated for audiences if he came back and, or at minimum, if Hanrahan, look here, you son of a, get your nigger loving, get Bolden going to jail and we'll get you he might have got rowdy, but the white people can't be ignorant about racism. Son of a gun just threatened me. He said under his breath, he actually threatened me. Yeah, see, he didn't say no. Say, you look here, you son of a, boy, I'll take you out here and filth foreign. And I bet you, boy, she got Sue Africa. My fault. He got Sue Africa. Look here. We know what to do with nigga. You seen James Chaney and them two. You seen James Chaney and them two nigger lovers. You seen what happened. Keep it up. Keep it in, and we can go outside. Like this Chicago, we gangster. They brag about that Al Capone and we can go outside anytime. Anytime. Nigga, I show you what we do with nigger lovers. I got my charges for your testicles too. Show you how we do a nigger lover. Say that son of a gun done threatened me. Greatest gangsters in the world. But she said Judge Perry is a gangster. It's a whole lot of gangsterism in Chicago. That's what they brag about that. St. Valentine's Day Massacre, thugs, ooh. Get out of here. Let's see. You say, he threatened me under his breath. I ain't never had that happen to me before in life, Bolden. I ain't never working with no niggers again. If you classified as white, going off code has consequences. White people cannot be ignorant about racism, period. Got 2 examples of that this week. What? Much obliged. That's as far as we got. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Chapter 5. Not Chapter 5. Number 5. On June 28, 1966, a bright summer day in Chicago. They don't even have bright summer days in Chicago like that. It is so cold. We learned that the U.S. Supreme Court had denied our application for a writ certiorari and would not hear the case. My understanding is that, like judicial Hail Mary, to use a NFL metaphor, in June of 2009, 8,241 petitions were filed with the Supreme Court and a grant rate of 1.1%. You is going to prison. Oh well. Let's see. Anything to share before that? Is so important. They threatened Ray Smith, his attorney. He's trying to appeal and all that. Threatened him. Total lack of couth. Like, this nigger is going, at minimum, this nigger is going to greater confinement, and we're going to probably try to kill him, but at minimum, this nigger is going to jail. And anybody got a problem with that, step forward. We'll deal with you too. George Howard, you got something to say about it? Smith, anybody else? Okay. Let's see. The judge ordered immediate incarceration. That's when you know you have really upset powerful white people. I mean, he should have known that already, but I mean, you have really upset powerful white people, and we intend to get rid of you like immediately. They didn't even put him because they said you'll be someplace safe. They'll put you in Whitten. Nope, Cook County. They were regular population. In fact, where's the Aryan prison gang? Put him right there. Aryan prison. Like, we have to see where do they put him in the prison, because this is total Shawshank Redemption. Like, he could have been killed during this era. Let's keep reading. Let's see. His wife is at Nabisco. I wonder if they got the red number 40 in the. Never mind. Let's see. They toss out all of his appeals. They don't even. I mean, well, that's white people make up the rules. You got to. I think Miss Harris has said that. I said you got a fair trial, and that's that. Like, in fact, you got 2 fair trials, and that's that. Now beat it. Wait a minute, didn't you? You done tampered with the verdict. You got 2 fair trials. Now beat it. Let's see. He said, Hanrahan personally wrote the government's brief in opposition to our request. His argument rested in part on Smith's hesitancy to recommend legal action against Sykes during the oral argument. So if Smith had said, yes, he should be recommended for being disbarred, sanctioned, and prosecuted for perjury, if he had said all that, they would have given him a new trial. Please. They just make up whatever, that lie and lie and lie. Let's see. When Bolden brought up the point about these judges, they are not going to overrule another white judge. These are their homies. These are their friends. They go to each other's houses and smoke cigars together and pipes together and hang out for barbecues and Christmas parties and all of that. Big facts. This is like a club in and of it. They call it the bar, right? My man George Howard said, I've been 30 years at the bar and sober. How many ever decades? And I'm sober. Well, Ed Hanrahan ain't say that. I'm out threatening people in the court. I'm going to get a shot right now. Had one before I came in to threaten old Smith. These are homies, and so I'm not going to come in here and ruin this young white attorney's career. He's just starting out for what? Getting rid of a Negro? He's doing his job. Like, that's what we pay him to do. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, Bolden, that's one time where I did beautifully accurate. Like, and all that nepotism and cronyism, that is the system of white supremacy through and through. That's why white people don't do no snitching on other white people. Kings, queens of the no snitch in the known universe. And then say, that's why y'all got all that crime in South Side of Chicago. No snitch. See, y'all don't work with law enforcement. See, Obama should have taught you better. Let's see. White people got each other's back. I could not imagine being a black person and I'm Spagnoli and I go to court and say, you committed perjury in court? Oh, yeah. So what's this here list? Oh, that's my list of lies, so I can keep everything straight. I get confused, you know. I got that old pecan-sized brain, so I got to keep my lies in what I would ain't no. I have the what they say. I'm gonna take the 5th on that one. Make sure I don't do what they call self-incriminate, because I can't even pronounce it right. So yeah, I'm just going 5th. I could not imagine. I got to get him in. Oh, yes, Your Honor. Yes, sir. Are you saying, Gus T., that you committed perjury? Yes, sir, Your Honor. That's exactly what I'm saying. Perjury. That's what I did. Like, what? I'm getting locked up on the stand. When Miss Harris, she said the marshals started moving up. That's what I would be expecting. Like, oh, there go the people. Yeah, all right. I'm going on in. Like, that's what I would be expecting. Like, wee, I'm not going to sleep easy today. Apparently for Spagnoli and everybody else, yeah. The only person who did not sleep well, Bolden. and he is the only person here. I didn't lie. I didn't commit a crime. You are the only one. Psh, you're going to jail. and I didn't even drink no liquor. Psh, well, maybe you should have. If you had, maybe you wouldn't have went to jail. That's what teetotalers get. What a message to send to children. And I mean, for real, from what we have read, unless I'm being totally ignorant, it almost seems if he had had his little flask of liquor and took a swig every now and then, hey, this nig is what Bold is one of ours. He's just one of the boys. Wink, wink. At the minimum, it wouldn't have been all that. And then if he'd shut up about, nigger loving Kennedy and unprivileged, you shut up about that, have a drink every now and then, everything could have been fine. You didn't want to play ball. You want to drink water. Okay. We'll show you what we do to just thinking niggers who want to drink water. Pass the Cavassier next time, won't you? Maybe my man Detective Cross, because he had a long Secret Service career, maybe he drank with the white people. Make a mockery of my recommendation. Like, woof. Wrap it up for this here week. Pitiful. We just have to, I keep saying, and many of us, I think they intended to kill Bolden. We'll have to pay attention to his conditions at Cook County. Like, oh man, that is not known as the safest prison conditions in this part of the world. Even now, 2025, I don't think. We'll have to see how that goes for next week. Anywho, we will be here tomorrow, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. We have folks in Chicago, hopefully great tidbits of information about your city. Hey, maybe even some folks will be inspired. There should be counter-racist biographies. Ed Hanrahan, John Burge. They already got books on John, but Ed Hanrahan, Judge Perry, Richard T. Sykes. Counter-racist books, reports, all of that. Like, just, woo, how white people practice white supremacy racism in the field of law. Chicago local system specifically, how they can practice over decades, terrorize all these different types of black people for decades. Stunning. More to learn. Let's see. Hey, my man's book, all those years at the bar and still sober, sobriety with 50 years, that's it, 50 years at the bar and still sober, sobriety would be best. Despite what happened to Mr. Bolden, teetotalers didn't work out well in this one, but even still, sobriety would be best. Drink more water, especially now that it's getting warmer, headed to summer. Creator, we ask that you help us maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Help us stop wasting non-white people's time and energy, especially our own. Minimize contact, minimize conflict, stop name-calling black people, stop being discourteous to black people, stop gossiping, stop producing throwaway offspring. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.